So, hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to our YouTube channel, Goofy Harry, and today we will see what if Harry Potter was born. So, today we are gonna see what if Harry Potter was born as Wanda Maximoff. Now, without any further delay, let's get straight to the video.
The last sunset Harry Potter would ever see as a normal wizard bled across the rooftops of Little Whinging like a wound. He sat on the edge of his bed in the smallest bedroom of number 4 Privet Drive, watching the sky through a window smeared with 16 years of reluctant cleaning. His trunk was packed. Hedwig's cage sat empty by the door. He'd sent her ahead to the burrow 3 days ago, and the room felt gutted without her quiet shuffling. Everything he owned fit into one battered trunk and a rucksack. 16 years in this house, and he could leave it in 10 minutes without looking back. Tomorrow the order would come for him. Mad Eye's plan, decoys, brooms, the Strowls, the whole paranoid circus. Harry had read the letter twice, memorized the details, and burned it as instructed. 7 Harrys. 7 routes. It was either brilliant or insane, and with Moody those were usually the same thing. But that was tomorrow. Tonight was the last night the blood protection held. His birthday was hours away, and with it the end of his mother's enchantment on this house. Lily's final gift spent. After midnight there would be no reason to stay and no magic keeping him safe within these walls. Harry leaned back against the headboard and stared at the ceiling. He should sleep. He wouldn't. There was something in the air tonight, he couldn't name it. A pressure behind his eyes, a hum in his teeth, like the feeling before a thunderstorm rolls in that electric, breathless anticipation. He'd chalked it up to nerves. Tomorrow was dangerous. People were risking their lives to move him. Voldemort's forces were out there in the dark, hunting, and every plan had cracks, but the feeling wasn't fear. It was deeper than that. Lower, like something buried under his ribs was trying to wake up. He pulled the Marauder's map from his back pocket out of habit, then remembered it was useless here, no Hogwarts corridors to watch, no tiny footprints to track. He folded it and tucked it into his trunk. His wand sat on the nightstand. Holly 11 inches, phoenix feather core. He picked it up, rolled it between his fingers, and felt the familiar warmth pulse through his palm. Last night, he muttered to nobody, downstairs, the Dursleys were pretending he didn't exist with even more vigor than usual. Vernon had grunted at him over dinner, leftover roast. Petunia's mouth pursed so tight it could have cracked walnuts, and Dudley had actually looked at him with something that might have been concern. That had been unsettling. Dudley Dursley showing emotional range was one of the signs of the apocalypse. Harry was fairly certain. He swung his legs off the bed and moved to the window. The street below was aggressively ordinary. Trimmed hedges, parked cars, the Hendersons' cat stalking something under a rosebush. Somewhere beyond the neat suburban grid, Death Eaters were massing. Somewhere Voldemort was planning. Somewhere Snape was doing whatever Snape did when he wasn't making Harry's life miserable. And somewhere, though Harry didn't know it yet, the enchantment his other mother had woven into his very soul was counting down its final hours. The clock on the nightstand read 10:47 p.m. He tried to read, couldn't focus, tried to plan, couldn't think. The humming behind his eyes was getting louder, or maybe he was just paying more attention to it. He rubbed his temples and paced the small room, 4 steps one way, 4 steps back. The floorboard near the closet creaked like it always did. He thought about Dumbledore. The funeral, white marble by the lake, and the hard knot of purpose that had formed in his chest that day. Horcruxes. The locket, the cup, the snake, something of Ravenclaw's or Gryffindor's, and himself, the accidental vessel, the piece of Voldemort's soul lodged behind his scar like shrapnel. He touched the lightning bolt absently. It had been quiet lately. No visions, no burning, just that low, persistent hum that had nothing to do with Voldemort at all. At 11:15, Petunia's voice drifted up the stairs. Dudley bed, now. At 11:30, the house settled into silence. Vernon's snores began their nightly foghorn impression through the wall. At 11:45, Harry gave up on sleep entirely and sat cross-legged on the floor with his back against the bed, his wand across his knees. 15 minutes until he was 17. 15 minutes until he was of age, legally allowed to do magic outside of school, free of the trace, an adult in the eyes of the wizarding world. He didn't feel like an adult. He felt like a kid sitting in a room that had never been his, waiting for something he couldn't name. 11:50. The hum was a vibration now. A resonance in his bones like he was a tuning fork and something had just struck the right note. He shifted uncomfortably. His scar prickled not Voldemort's usual ice-pick intrusion but something softer. A warming. 11:55. Harry's hands were shaking. He noticed with detached surprise, holding them up in the dim orange glow of the streetlight through the window. His fingers trembled like he'd just come in from the cold. But the room was warm. Summer warm, stifling, the air thick and still. Get a grip, he told himself. 11:58. The shaking spread to his arms, his shoulders, his jaw, a fine, involuntary tremor that he couldn't clench his way out of. His wand rattled against his knees. The air in the room felt heavier, denser, like the barometric pressure was plummeting. His ears popped. 11:59, something was wrong. Or something was right, profoundly, terrifyingly right, and his body knew it before his mind did. Harry grabbed the edge of the bed and hauled himself upright, legs unsteady. The room swam. Colours seemed brighter than they should be in the dark, the whites whiter, the shadows deeper, every edge sharper. He could see the grain of the wood on the door from across the room. He could hear Vernon's heartbeat through the wall, slow and thick. He could smell the petunias in the garden 2 stories below. The clock on the nightstand ticked and turned. 12 a.m. July 31st. Harry Potter turned 17 and the world cracked open. It started in his chest. A detonation, not pain, not exactly, but a release, like a dam giving way, like a held breath finally gasping free after years of suffocation. Something that had been locked down, compressed, sealed away behind enchantments he'd never known existed. Something vast and ancient and red broke loose. He screamed. The sound tore out of him involuntarily, and it wasn't just sound. The window exploded outward. The light bulb overhead burst. The mirror on the wardrobe shattered into 1,000 pieces that hung suspended in the air, spinning slowly, each shard reflecting a room bathed in crimson light, because Harry was glowing. Scarlet energy poured off him like flames, licking up his arms, spiraling around his torso, bleeding from his eyes. Not fire, something else entirely. Something that moved with intention, that curled and eddied and reached like it was alive. The air rippled around him, reality bending at the edges like heat shimmer off asphalt, and every object in the room began to float. The trunk, the nightstand, the bed, all of it rising slowly, drifting as gravity politely stepped aside, and then the memories hit. They came like a flood, not gradually, not gently. They crashed into him, a tidal wave of images and sounds and sensations that weren't his but were, that belonged to a life before this life, to a space between spaces where a woman with dark hair and desperate eyes had held him and wept. A room made of red light. No walls, no ceiling, just colour, warm and humming, and hands cupping his face. Small face, infant face. He was so small and she was everything. Dark hair falling around him like curtains, eyes that glowed with the same scarlet that now poured from his skin, and a voice, her voice, cracked with love and grief and terrible purpose. "I'm sorry, my little one. I'm sorry I have to send you where they can't find you, where you'll be safe." Her tears fell on his forehead and they burned, not with pain but with magic. Deep magic. Reality-shaping magic. She was rewriting him, not erasing but layering, building a shell of normalcy over the extraordinary thing he was, encoding it to hold for 16 years and dissolve on the 17th. "You'll forget me, you have to forget me, but I'll be here." A hand on his chest. "Always here. And when you're ready, when you're old enough, strong enough, you'll remember, you'll know what you are." Scarlet light, blinding everywhere, and the sensation of falling between worlds, between realities, between the pages of existence, and landing softly, so softly. In a crib in Godric's Hollow, where a woman with red hair and green eyes leaned over him and smiled, and didn't question the miracle of a child appearing where no child had been moments before because the magic made it seamless, made it true. Wrote him into the fabric of this world as if he'd always been there. Lily Potter's son. Written into reality by chaos magic so thoroughly that even blood wards recognized the bond. Harry hit the floor on his hands and knees, gasping. The memories kept coming, fragmented, overwhelming. A kaleidoscope of moments from a place that wasn't here. The woman, his mother, his first mother, standing on a hill, scarlet energy swirling around her like a hurricane. The sky above her was wrong, broken, and she was holding it together through sheer will. A book floated before her, dark and pulsing, and she was reading from it even as it consumed her. The Darkhold will show me the way. There's a child, a soul, caught between worlds. A boy who died before he lived. I can save him, I can give him what was taken. A man's voice, distant, warning. Wanda, the cost, I know the cost. Red light, so bright it burned through the vision, and then Harry threw his head back and the ceiling cracked, not metaphorically. A fissure split the plaster from one end of the room to the other, and through it he could see the night sky, not because the roof had broken, but because his power was peeling back the layers of physical reality like pages of a book. He could see everything. The wards around the house, Lily's blood protection, were dissolving in real time, evaporating like morning dew, and beneath them, woven into the deeper structure of the enchantments, he saw another layer entirely. Older. Different. Red threads of magic so fundamental they were stitched into the quantum foam of reality itself. His mother's magic. Wanda's magic. The shell she'd built to hide him, dissolving on schedule exactly as she'd designed, and beneath that his own power, surging upward like a geyser finally uncapped. Two magical cores, he realized with dizzy clarity. He'd always had two. One wizard, one something else, something that didn't play by the same rules. The wizarding core was a river, powerful, directed, channeled through wand and word. The other was an ocean. Vast and red and borderless, responding not to incantation but to will, bending reality not through the established pathways of magic, but by rewriting the rules themselves. Chaos magic. The term surfaced from the flood of memories like a body rising from deep water. That's what she called it. That's what he was. The door to his room burst open. Vernon Dursley stood in the doorway in his pajamas, face purple, mustache quivering, and whatever tirade he'd been about to unleash died in his throat as he took in the scene. His nephew floating 3 feet off the ground, wreathed in scarlet light, eyes blazing red, every object in the room orbiting him like planets around a sun. The walls cracking, the air humming with power so dense it was visible, red motes of energy drifting like embers. Pee-pee Petunia. Vernon whispered, then louder, Petunia, Uncle Vernon. Harry's voice came out layered, his own voice and something deeper underneath it, resonant, thrumming with power. You should get downstairs. What are you? What is this freakishness? Now, Uncle Vernon. The command carried weight. Not magical compulsion, Harry wouldn't do that, but the sheer authority of someone who could unmake the house with a thought and was choosing not to. Vernon stumbled backward, face white now instead of purple, and fled down the stairs. Harry heard Petunia's shriek, Dudley's confused shouting, the front door slamming open as the Dursleys evacuated their own home. Good. They needed to be away from this. Harry clenched his fists and tried to pull the power back in. It was like trying to hold water in open hands. It slipped and surged and refused to be contained. The scarlet energy whipped around the room, leaving scorch marks on the walls that healed themselves instantly, reality breaking and reknitting in the same breath. Control, he told himself. She gave you this. She trusted you with this. Control it. He thought of Wanda, and the name came naturally as if he'd always known it, thought of her hands, steady and precise, sculpting scarlet light into shapes and structures. He'd seen it in the memories. She didn't fight the chaos. She shaped it, gave it purpose. Will and intention, not force, Harry breathed. In, out, slowly, the objects drifting around the room settled. The trunk landed with a thump. The bed creaked back onto its frame. The mirror shards, still floating, still spinning, drifted together and reassembled themselves, seamless, not a crack visible. The scarlet light didn't fade, but it dimmed, pulling in closer, wrapping around him like a second skin. He lowered himself to the floor. His feet touched the carpet, and he stood there, breathing hard, sweat on his forehead, hands still trembling but in control. Barely. Like holding a live wire and choosing where to point it, he looked at his reflection in the newly restored mirror. His eyes glowed faintly red, pulsing with each heartbeat, and scarlet energy curled around his fingers like smoke. Otherwise, he looked the same. Messy black hair, glasses slightly askew, the scar on his forehead now faintly luminous, the dark fragment behind it squirming in agitation as if it sensed the new power and was afraid of it. Good, Harry thought, and pressed his hand against the scar. You should be afraid. The fragment writhed, and he could feel it clearly now, a greasy, dark smear on the fabric of his being, a splinter of someone else's soul jammed into his own. He'd carried it for 16 years without knowing. Now, with his new senses blazing wide open, it was as obvious as a tumor on an X-ray. He could remove it. He knew that with absolute certainty. The chaos magic could reach in and pluck it out like pulling a thorn, but not now. Not in the middle of this maelstrom, with his power barely leashed and the Dursleys probably calling the police from the neighbour's house. A crack of apparitions split the night air outside. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. Harry's new senses flared outward instinctively, and the world expanded. He could feel them, magical signatures like heat signatures but more complex, each one unique. 7 apparitions in a ring around the house. Dark, oily, wrong-feeling magic. The taste of cruelty and fanaticism, Death Eaters they'd been watching. Of course they had. Voldemort had people monitoring the house, waiting for the blood protection to fall, and Harry's explosive awakening had just lit up the magical spectrum like a flare gun. He heard the first curse before he saw it. A killing curse, green and screaming, blasting through the destroyed window and streaking toward his chest. Harry raised his hand. He didn't think about it, didn't plan it. The scarlet energy moved with his will faster than thought, and a barrier of red light snapped into existence between him and the curse. The killing curse, the unblockable, unshieldable pinnacle of dark magic, hit the barrier and dissolved, not deflected, not absorbed, unmade. The magic composing it came apart at the seams, deconstructed into harmless light that scattered and faded. Harry stared at his hand. Then another curse hit the barrier, and another, a volley of green and red and purple light hammering the front of the house. The Death Eaters were unloading everything they had, blowing holes in the walls, shattering the remaining windows, setting the hedge on fire. Harry stepped through the wall, not through the door, not through the window. Through the wall. The bricks parted around him like water, reality bending to let him pass, and he stepped out onto the front lawn of number 4 Privet Drive, barefoot on the grass, scarlet energy blazing around him like a bonfire. 7 Death Eaters. Masked, robed, wands raised, spreading out in a semicircle. The one on the far left, tall, moving with a predator's confidence, barked a command and they opened fire again. 7 curses screamed toward Harry simultaneously. He caught them. Not with a shield, he caught them, each curse freezing mid-flight in a bubble of scarlet light, the killing green and cruciatus red hanging motionless in the air like insects in amber. 7 curses, suspended powerless, their casters staring in disbelief. Harry looked at the frozen curses. Looked at the Death Eaters. The scarlet light around him pulsed. "You picked the wrong night," he said. He closed his fist and the curses shattered, not redirected, just ended, their magic dispersed into the warm summer air. Then he pushed his hand forward, fingers spread, and a wave of scarlet force rolled across the lawn like a silent explosion. The Death Eaters went flying. All 7, launched backward as if hit by a freight train, smashing through hedges, cracking against lampposts, tumbling across the pristine tarmac of Privet Drive. One spun from broken fingers. Masks cracked and fell away, revealing faces, some he didn't recognize. One he thought might be Roll, another who looked like one of the Carrows. The tall one, the leader, recovered first, rolling to his feet with impressive agility, wand already slashing through the air. Fiend fire. Cursed fire erupted from his wand tip, roaring into the shape of a massive serpent that lunged at Harry with jaws wide enough to swallow a car. The heat was staggering, the magical fire consuming the oxygen around it, the Henderson's cat bolting with a yowl of terror. Harry looked at the fire serpent bearing down on him and felt the chaos magic surge in response. Not fear, recognition. Fire was just energy. Energy was just a state of matter, and matter, he was beginning to understand, was something he could talk to. He raised both hands and the scarlet light met the fiend fire head-on. The cursed fire screamed, actually screamed, as the chaos magic wrapped around it, suffocated it, deconstructed the dark enchantment that gave it life and will. The serpent shape collapsed, the fire died, and where it had been there was nothing but a gentle warmth and the faint smell of ozone. The tall Death Eater took a step back. Behind his cracked mask, Harry could see wide, disbelieving eyes. "What are you?" the man breathed. Harry didn't answer. He flicked his wrist, and the man's wand snapped in half in his hand. Another flick and ropes of scarlet energy wrapped around all 7 Death Eaters, pinning them where they lay or stood, binding wrists and ankles and sealing mouths. They struggled. The bindings held like iron. More cracks of apparition, but these felt different. Familiar. Friendly. Alistair Moody materialized on the sidewalk, magical eye already spinning wildly, wand up and scanning. Remus Lupin appeared next to him, then Tonks, then Kingsley Shacklebolt. They'd come early. The explosion of magical energy from Harry's awakening must have been detectable for miles. They stopped. All 4 of them, battle-ready, wands raised, and they stopped. Because Harry was standing in the middle of the Dursleys' front lawn, barefoot, surrounded by 7 bound Death Eaters and the lingering embers of destroyed fiendfire, wreathed in scarlet light that moved and coiled around him like a living thing. His eyes glowed red. The air around him hummed with power so thick it was almost visible, a heat shimmer distortion that made the houses and streetlights behind him waver like a mirage. Moody's magical eye fixed on Harry and stopped spinning. Both eyes, magical and normal, went wide. In all the years Harry had known Mad-Eye Moody, he had never seen the man look afraid. But the colour drained from Moody's scarred face, and his wand hand trembled just slightly before he locked it steady through sheer force of will. Potter. Moody's voice was low, careful, the way you'd talk to someone holding a live grenade. What happened? Long story, Harry said. His voice still had that resonance, his normal voice layered over something deeper. He tried to pull it back and mostly succeeded. Short version, I woke up. Your eyes, Lupin said, and there was something raw in his tone, fear and wonder fighting for space. Harry, your eyes are red, yeah, I know. Harry looked down at his hands, the scarlet energy still curling between his fingers. He willed it dimmer, and it obeyed mostly. The glow in his eyes faded to a faint luminescence. I'll explain everything. But first, there are 7 Death Eaters here who need collecting, and the Dursleys are probably having a collective heart attack somewhere. Those bindings, Kingsley said, staring at the trussed-up Death Eaters. His deep voice was steady, but Harry could hear his heartbeat, faster than normal. He could hear all their heartbeats now. That's not any spell I recognize. It's not a spell, Harry said simply. Nobody seemed to know what to do with that. Tonks broke the silence first, because Tonks always broke silences. Well, he doesn't look Imperiused, and those are definitely Death Eaters, so maybe we do the debrief somewhere that isn't a Muggle street. She was right. Lights were coming on in nearby houses, curtains twitching. The explosions and fire hadn't been subtle, and the statute of secrecy was already in critical condition. Moody snapped into action, the old aura's pragmatism overriding his shock. Tonks, obliviation detail, every Muggle on this street. Shacklebolt, secure the prisoners for transport. Lupin, get the Dursleys and clean their memories. Potter, he fixed Harry with a look that was half command, half question. Can you travel, side along to the burrow? Harry almost laughed. He could feel the burrow from here. Not in a vague, directional sense, he could feel it. The dense knot of warming charms and protection wards and love-soaked magic that permeated the Weasley home, 60 miles away, as clear as a beacon. He could step there in an instant, folding the space between here and there like a piece of paper. But he was still Harry, and these were still his people, and some things shouldn't change. Side-along's fine, he said. Lupin crossed the lawn toward him, and Harry watched his former professor carefully compose his face into something neutral. But his eyes, amber, wolfish even in human form, kept flickering to the scarlet energy that Harry couldn't entirely suppress, licking at his wrists like candle flames. Harry, Lupin stopped in front of him, close, searching his face. Are you all right? Truly, the honest answer was complicated. He was terrified and exhilarated and grieving for a mother he'd only just remembered and marvelling at power he didn't fully understand and already strategizing about Horcruxes with a clarity that hadn't existed an hour ago. He was fine. He was the furthest thing from fine. He was more himself than he'd ever been. I'm getting there, Harry said. Ask me again tomorrow. Lupin nodded slowly, then held out his arm. Harry took it, and they disapparated with a crack that sounded, to Harry's new senses, like a single note in a vast and complex symphony. The burrow materialized around them in a rush of warm night air and cricket song. Harry's feet hit the soft earth of the Weasley garden, and he had to grab Lupin's arm to steady himself, not from the apparition which he'd barely felt, but from the sheer sensory overload of the burrow's magical field. The house sang. He'd never noticed it before, but the burrow was drenched in enchantment. Layers upon layers of protective magic, domestic charms, warming spells, the residue of 1,000 meals cooked with love and 100 arguments resolved with laughter. It was ancient in places, the foundation wards dating back generations, and it pulsed with an energy that was unmistakably Weasley, warm, chaotic, generous, a little bit stubborn. Harry could feel it all, every thread and knot and patch, and it made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. The kitchen door flew open, and Molly Weasley stood silhouetted in the light, wand in hand, face tight with worry. Behind her, a flash of red hair, Ron, trying to see past his mother, and the bushier silhouette of Hermione crowding in behind him. Remus, what happened? We felt something, the wards went mad, everything was shaking, is Harry. She saw him. She saw the faint red glow still clinging to his skin, the scarlet light curling around his hands, his eyes that hadn't fully returned to green. "Hi, Mrs. Weasley," Harry said, and his voice cracked a little, and the scarlet energy flared briefly in response to the emotion before he wrestled it back down. Molly Weasley was many things, overbearing, overprotective, fierce as a dragon when it came to her children and the people she considered her children. But she was not and had never been a coward. The fear crossed her face and left it in the space of a heartbeat, replaced by something harder and more fundamental. "Inside," she said firmly. "Now I'll put the kettle on, because some things were universal." The world could crack and reshape itself, magic could rewrite the rules of reality, and Molly Weasley would respond by making tea. Harry followed her into the kitchen, and Ron and Hermione were on him immediately. "Mate, what the hell?" Ron started. "Harry, your magical signature, it's completely different, I can feel it from," Hermione spoke over him. They both stopped when they got a good look at his eyes. "Sit down," Harry said. "Both of you, please." They sat. The kitchen was warm and cluttered, and exactly as Harry remembered it. Dishes washing themselves in the sink. The clock on the wall with all its hands pointed to mortal peril, as they had been for months. A half-eaten plate of biscuits on the table. Harry sat across from his friends and placed his hands flat on the worn wooden surface. Scarlet light leaked from his fingertips, leaving faint, glowing trails on the wood like bioluminescent algae. Lupin stood by the door, watching. Molly moved around the kitchen with the determined efficiency of a woman who needed to keep her hands busy. The kettle went on. "Before the order gets here and turns this into an interrogation," Harry said, "I need to tell you something, both of you." Ron's freckled face was pale but set. Hermione's eyes were wide and analytical, already cataloguing, already trying to understand. They were scared. Harry could feel their fear, not with legilimency but with something deeper, an empathic sensitivity that the chaos magic granted, reading the emotional resonance of the people around him like reading the currents in water. But beneath the fear, trust. Bedrock deep, tested and proven over 6 years of impossible situations. They were afraid and they weren't going anywhere. Harry loved them so much it hurt. "I'm not just Lily and James Potter's son," he said. "I mean I am, in every way that matters for this world. But before I was theirs, I was someone else's." He told them. Not everything, the memories were still settling, some clear as photographs, others blurred and fragmented, but the core of it. A woman named WANDA Maximoff, chaos magic. A soul rescued from a dying world and rewritten into a new one. A mother's desperate gambit to save her child by hiding him so thoroughly that even he didn't know. The kettle boiled. Molly poured tea, nobody touched it. "She put a lock on me," Harry said, turning his hands over, watching the scarlet energy play across his palms. "A shell. My chaos magic, that's what it's called, what she could do, was sealed away, layered under my wizarding magic, set to dissolve when I turned 17. Tonight it broke open." Ron opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "So you're telling me that on top of being Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the chosen one, all of that, you're also the son of some kind of interdimensional witch goddess?" "She wasn't a goddess," Harry said quietly. "She was a woman who lost everything and used the last of her strength to make sure I'd survive." Ron absorbed that. Then, "Okay, but the power thing, the red stuff, what exactly can you do now?" Harry glanced at the biscuit plate in the center of the table. A single digestive remained. He looked at it, willed it, and the biscuit shivered, then unfolded itself, the crumbs knitting together, multiplying, the plate filling with fresh, warm biscuits that smelled of butter and sugar. "I just transmuted matter," Harry said conversationally. "Reorganized the molecular structure and multiplied it. Also works on larger scales. Theoretically, there isn't really an upper limit." Ron stared at the biscuits, reached out, took one, bit into it, chewed thoughtfully. "These are really good biscuits," he said. Hermione made a strangled sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Ron!" "What? I'm processing. I process through food. You know this about me." She turned to Harry, and the analytical intensity in her eyes was running at full power, but there were tears on her cheeks. "Harry, the magical theory behind what you're describing, it shouldn't be possible. Transmutation at that level violates Gamp's law." "Gamp's law is a description of what wizarding magic can do," Harry said gently. "This isn't wizarding magic. It's different. It operates on a different level. Deeper. It doesn't channel through existing magical pathways, it rewrites them." "You can rewrite the laws of magic," Hermione said flatly. "Some of them. Probably. I'm still figuring it out." Hermione sat very still for a long moment. Then she picked up a biscuit, bit into it with savage precision, and said, "We're going to need a bigger library." That startled a real laugh out of Harry, the first genuine laugh he'd had in months, and the scarlet energy around him flared warm and bright before settling. It responded to his emotions, he was realizing. Joy made it bloom, fear made it spike, calm made it flow. He'd need to learn its rhythms, map its responses, build the kind of intuitive control that Wanda had shown in his memories. But that was for tomorrow, and the day after. He had time now in a way he hadn't before. Not much time, the war was still raging, but the calculus had changed. He wasn't an underdog anymore. The kitchen door opened, and Mad-Eye Moody stumped in, followed by Kingsley and Tonks. Behind them, Arthur Weasley, still in his ministry robes, face drawn with anxiety. And behind Arthur, stepping through the door with the careful grace of a man who moved deliberately to conceal his age, Albus Dumbledore. Wait, Harry blinked. The room went very quiet. Dumbledore was dead. Harry had been at the funeral. He'd watched the white tomb close. "It's a Patronus projection," Hermione whispered, and Harry saw it now, the faint, translucent quality around the edges, the slight shimmer. Not Dumbledore in the flesh. A magical communication, life-sized, rendered with extraordinary skill. No, not a Patronus, something else, a portrait, an echo. "No," Harry said softly, his new senses reaching out and touching the apparition. "It's his portrait, from the headmaster's office, someone's channeling it." The portrait. Dumbledore smiled, and even as an echo of an echo, the old man's presence filled the room. He looked exactly as Harry remembered, the half-moon spectacles, the long silver beard, the eyes that twinkled with intelligence and secrets. "Good evening, Harry," the portrait said. The voice was Dumbledore's, precise and warm, but with the slight flatness of a painting speaking through a magical relay. "Or rather, good morning. I understand you've had quite a birthday. Professor McGonagall is facilitating this projection," Kingsley explained, moving to stand beside the shimmering image. "Given the circumstances, we felt it necessary." Harry stood slowly. He looked at the portrait of the man who'd guided and manipulated and protected and used him in roughly equal measure for 6 years. The man who'd known about the Horcruxes, who'd planned Harry's arc through the war like a chess grandmaster, who'd kept secrets and doled out information in careful portions, and died with half the truth still locked behind his twinkling eyes. "Did you know?" Harry asked. The portrait tilted its head. "You'll need to be more specific, my boy. I knew a great many things. About me, about what I am. Did you know I wasn't just a wizard?" Silence. The portrait's expression shifted, the twinkle dimming, something older and wearier emerging. "I suspected." Portrait. Dumbledore said carefully. "From the moment I first examined you as an infant, I could feel something additional in your magical signature, something I could not identify or categorize. It was layered beneath your wizarding magic, sealed and dormant, and no diagnostic charm I possessed could penetrate its nature. I hypothesized it was a byproduct of Voldemort's curse, residual dark magic, perhaps, or an unusual manifestation of your mother's protection. But you didn't look deeper. I looked as deep as my abilities allowed. Whatever sealed your other nature did so with a sophistication beyond anything in my experience, and I had other concerns." The portrait paused. "Other plans. Plans that involved me dying," Harry said, not angrily. just factually. The room went cold. Ron inhaled sharply. Hermione's hand found Harry's arm under the table. The portrait met his gaze steadily. Plans that involved you making a choice. The same choice your mothers, I should say, made. Sacrifice out of love. I believed and still believe that it was the only way to destroy the fragment of Voldemort's soul within you. You're wrong, Harry said. He raised his hand and the scarlet energy spiraled upward from his palm, forming a small, intricate sphere of red light. Inside it, visible to everyone in the room, a dark smear writhed, an ugly, oily thing that squirmed and recoiled from the scarlet glow surrounding it. That's the Horcrux, Harry said. The piece of Voldemort's soul in my scar. I pulled it to the surface an hour ago. I can feel it completely now, every tendril, every root, every connection it's made to my magical core over 16 years. He looked at the portrait. I can remove it, without dying, without sacrifice, without your plan. Dumbledore's portrait stared at the writhing dark fragment suspended in scarlet light. The painted face showed an expression Harry had rarely seen on the real Dumbledore, genuine, unguarded surprise. Extraordinary, the portrait breathed. But not tonight. Harry said, closing his fist and reabsorbing the fragment back below his scar. The dark smear vanished from sight, though he could still feel it squirming. I need to understand my power better before I try something that delicate. Soon, though, days, not weeks. Harry. Moody growled from the corner, his magical eye fixed unblinkingly on Harry's scarlet-wreathed form. I need you to understand that what you did tonight, what you are tonight, is going to change everything. The Death Eaters who attacked you will report back. The ones who got away. None of them got away. The ones who what? I bound all 7. Kingsley brought them in, none got away. Moody's normal eye blinked, his magical eye kept staring. Fine, but Voldemort will have felt your power surge from wherever he's hiding, whatever element of surprise. Good, Harry said. Moody stopped. I don't want surprise, Harry said. I don't want to hide, I'm done hiding. I've been hidden my entire life, hidden from the wizarding world until I was 11, hidden behind blood wards, hidden behind plans and prophecies and other people's strategies. My mother, my first mother, hid my power to protect me while I was a child. I'm not a child anymore. He stood, and the chair pushed itself neatly back behind him without him touching it. The scarlet energy pulsed, and every candle in the kitchen flared brighter. Voldemort has Horcruxes. I can sense dark magic now in a way I never could before. I can feel them, not their specific locations yet, but their existence, like splinters in the fabric of the world. We're going to find them, and we're going to destroy them, and then we're going to end this war. Not in a year. Not in months of hiding in a tent. Quickly. Arthur Weasley cleared his throat. Harry, the Ministry has fallen. Thickness is under the Imperius. They'll be coming for you. Let them come. And for everyone associated with you. The Weasleys, the Order. Harry's expression softened. He looked around the kitchen, at Ron's pale, determined face, at Hermione's fierce eyes, at Molly clutching her teacup with white-knuckled hands, at Arthur trying to be brave, at Lupin and Tonks standing shoulder to shoulder, at Kingsley's steady calm, at Moody's eternal vigilance. I won't let anyone hurt you, he said, and the words carried weight, not magical compulsion but promise backed by power that made the air thrum. Any of you. That's not arrogance, it's a fact. I can feel every ward on this house, and I'm going to reinforce them tonight with something no Death Eater will be able to crack. The burrow will be safe. Your families will be safe. You can't protect everyone, Potter, Moody said, but there was less growl in it than usual. No, Harry agreed. But I can protect more people than I could yesterday, and tomorrow I'll know more than I do today. I'm learning fast. He looked at his hands, his own hands, thin and scarred and still smudged with dirt from the garden, and the scarlet energy curled affectionately around his fingers. She designed it that way, my mother. The knowledge is unlocking alongside the power, piece by piece, like she's teaching me even now. Hermione stood. Then we start tonight. Harry, I need you to tell me everything you remember about Wanda, every detail. If I can cross-reference with existing magical theory, comparative thaumaturgical models, maybe the arithmetic frameworks in, Hermione. Right, breathing, one thing at a time. Ron stood too, brushing biscuit crumbs off his shirt. What do you need from us, mate? Harry looked at his best friend. Ron's ears were red. They always went red when he was overwhelmed, and his hands were shoved in his pockets to hide whatever they were doing. But his jaw was set and his eyes were steady, and he was here, asking what Harry needed, the way he'd always been here when it counted. "Same thing I've always needed," Harry said. "You, both of you, the power is new, but the mission hasn't changed. Horcruxes first, Voldemort after. And I can't do it alone. I don't want to do it alone." "You won't," Hermione said firmly. "Wouldn't dream of it," Ron said. Something in Harry's chest, something that had nothing to do with chaos magic and everything to do with being 16 and terrified and loved, unclenched. "The wedding," Molly said suddenly, because Molly Weasley's mind never stopped working on 12 things simultaneously. "Bill and Fleur's wedding is in 3 days. If the Ministry's fallen, if Death Eaters are, the wedding happens," Harry said. "I'll ward the burrow myself. No one crashes that wedding." Molly looked at him, really looked, past the glowing eyes and the impossible power, and saw what she'd always seen. A too-thin boy who needed feeding, who'd grown up without enough love, who kept trying to carry the world and wouldn't let anyone help. "You'll eat something first," she said. "Mrs. Weasley, you have just undergone some kind of massive magical transformation. You are clearly exhausted. You haven't eaten since those awful muggles fed you whatever passes for dinner in that house. And I don't care if you can reshape reality with your bare hands. You will sit down and eat a proper meal before you do anything else. Am I understood?" Harry sat down. The scarlet energy dimmed to a faint shimmer, as if even chaos magic knew better than to argue with Molly Weasley. Over reheated shepherd's pie and more tea, the plan took shape. Moody wanted a full assessment of Harry's abilities. "Not because I don't trust you, Potter, but because I need to know what we're working with." Kingsley would handle the orders, repositioning now that the Ministry was compromised. Arthur would go underground, operating as a mole inside the Ministry as long as he safely could. Lupin had werewolf contacts who might be turned to their cause with the right leverage, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione would hunt Horcruxes. But not the way Dumbledore had envisioned, not 3 teenagers on the run, scraping by, starving in forests. Harry could feel the fragments of Voldemort's soul pulling at the edges of his perception like snagged threads in a sweater. Given a few days to calibrate his senses, he was confident he could track them. "The locket," Harry said, pushing his empty plate aside. "Slytherin's locket. It's at the Ministry. Mundungus Fletcher stole it from Grimmauld Place and it ended up with Umbridge." "How do you know?" "I can see Creature's memory of it. He tried to destroy it for Regulus." Harry paused, feeling the strangeness of that statement. He was accessing information he shouldn't have, pulling it from... where? The ambient magical residue of Creature's emotional trauma, imprinted on the locket's dark signature. The chaos magic was showing him connections between things, threads of causality and magical resonance that normal wizarding perception couldn't detect. "That is deeply unsettling, Potter." Moody said. "It is a bit, yeah." Harry ran a hand through his hair. "The point is, I know where it is. The Ministry around Umbridge's neck. We go in, we take it, we destroy it." "You want to break into the Ministry of Magic," Arthur said carefully. "I want to walk into the Ministry of Magic." "There's a difference. The difference being, breaking in implies I'd need to sneak. I don't." Silence around the table. The clock on the wall ticked, all hands still pointing to mortal peril. Outside, the first hints of dawn were greying the sky. 3 days, Harry said. "Give me 3 days to learn what I can do to ward this house, to make sure the wedding goes safely. Then we go after the locket." He looked around the table. "I know this is a lot. I know I've just appended everything. But the war is happening whether we're ready or not, and for the first time I think we might actually be able to win it, not just survive. Win." Moody studied him for a long, hard moment, his magical eye boring into Harry with an intensity that suggested it was seeing things on spectrums Harry could only guess at. Then the old aura grunted. 3 days, Moody said, "and I want to see everything. Every trick, every limit, don't hold back." "Wouldn't dream of it." The meeting dissolved into quieter conversations, Kingsley and Moody in the corner, heads together, Arthur and Molly in a murmured exchange that was half logistics, half the silent communication of a long marriage. Lupin and Tonks left to relay information to other Order members. Ron yawned hugely and immediately tried to pretend he hadn't. "Bed," Harry said. "All of us, it's nearly dawn." "Don't have to tell me twice." Ron stood, stretched, and then hesitated. "Harry, mate, the whole new mum, chaos magic, glowing red eyes thing, it's a lot." "I know. But you're still you, right? Still the same git who got me into fights with mountain trolls and giant spiders and whatever the hell that thing in the lake was, Harry smiled. Still me, just more, Ron nodded. Right, more. I can work with more. He clapped Harry on the shoulder, flinched slightly at the tingle of residual energy and headed for the stairs. Coming, Hermione, in a minute. Hermione waited until Ron's footsteps faded, then turned to Harry with an expression he'd seen before, the one she wore when she was about to say something important and was choosing her words with surgical precision. Harry, Hermione, this power, the chaos magic, there's nothing like it in any magical tradition I've ever studied, nothing even close, and I've studied a lot. Yes. What I'm trying to say is you're uncharted territory, completely. There are no books for this, no precedents, no guidelines. And that means there's no one who can tell you what the limits are, or the dangers, or… I know. Let me finish. She stepped closer, and her eyes were fierce and frightened and determined. No one can tell you those things, so you have to tell us. If something feels wrong, if the power pushes you somewhere you don't want to go, if you start to lose yourself in it, you tell me and Ron. Promise me. Harry looked at her, Hermione Granger, who'd been petrified and time-travelled and punched Draco Malfoy and ridden a dragon and never once wavered in her loyalty. Hermione, who wasn't asking him to be less than he was, but to stay who he was while he became more. I promise, he said. She hugged him. Tightly, fiercely, her arms around his neck and her face pressed against his shoulder. The scarlet energy flared gently around them both, warm and harmless, and Hermione made a small sound of surprise. It tingles, she said, pulling back. Your magic, it's warm. Chaos magic is fueled by emotion, Harry said, the knowledge surfacing naturally. The stronger the feeling, the stronger the power. And you too, you and Ron, you're the strongest thing I've got. Hermione's eyes glistened. She nodded once sharply and headed for the stairs. At the base she paused. Harry, your mother, Wanda, she sounds remarkable. She was, Harry said. She is, I don't think she's gone, not entirely. Hermione opened her mouth, closed it and settled for a small, aching smile before disappearing up the stairs. Harry sat alone in the Weasley kitchen. The clock ticked. Dawn light crept through the windows, painting the cluttered room in shades of gold and amber. The dishes in the sink finished washing themselves and settled onto the drying rack with quiet ceramic clicks. Harry held up his hand and let the scarlet energy bloom freely. A flower of red light unfolding from his palm, complex and beautiful, fractals within fractals, patterns that echoed the fundamental geometry of reality itself. He could feel the chaos magic settling into him, integrating with his wizarding core, the two systems of power learning to coexist and complement. It would take time, but the foundation was solid and the power was vast, vaster than he'd yet tested, vaster than he probably understood. Somewhere, across the impossible distances between realities, a woman with dark hair and sad eyes had given up everything to save him. Had torn a soul from one dying world and planted it in another, had built him a life and a family and a legacy, had sealed away his true nature not to diminish him but to protect him until he was ready. He was ready now. Harry closed his fist around the scarlet light and stood. There was work to do. A war to fight, Horcruxes to destroy, a dark lord to end, but first sleep. A few hours at least. He climbed the crooked stairs of the burrow, past the ghoul in the attic banging on the pipes, past Ginny's door and the twins' old room to Ron's room at the top. The camp bed was already set up. Ron was snoring faintly, a half-eaten biscuit still in his hand. Harry lay down and stared at the orange ceiling, Chudley Cannon's posters peeling at the corners. The last thought he had before sleep took him wasn't about power or war or Voldemort. It was a memory, his first memory, his true first memory of warm hands and scarlet light and a voice breaking with love. You'll remember. You'll know what you are. I know, Mum, he whispered. The scarlet light around his hands dimmed to embers and Harry Potter slept. Outside, the sun rose over the burrow, and the world had changed. Chapter 2. Red Inheritance. Harry woke to the smell of bacon and the sound of an argument. The argument was coming from downstairs, Molly's voice, sharp and worried, cutting against the low rumble of Moody's tactical growl. The bacon was doing its job regardless, dragging Harry out of a dreamless sleep and into the golden morning light that poured through Ron's window. The camp bed creaked as he sat up. Ron's bed was empty, sheets tangled, pillow on the floor. A glance at the battered clock on the wall said it was past noon. He'd slept for 7 hours. It felt like 7 minutes. Harry swung his legs over the side of the bed, and his bare feet hit the wooden floor, and the burrow pulsed around him. Every ward, every charm, every enchantment layered into the house over generations lit up in his perception like a circuit board coming online. He could feel the protective spells on the doors and windows, the warming charms in the walls, the ancient anti-apparition jinx that covered the property, the newer order protections layered on top like fresh paint over old wood. He could feel the garden gnomes burrowing beneath the vegetable patch, the chickens scratching in their coop, the lazy drift of magic in the pond where the Weasleys sometimes swam, and he could feel the people. Not their thoughts, not exactly, but their presence, their emotional signatures, the way each person's magic coloured the air around them. Molly's magic was fierce and warm, a bonfire contained in a hearth. Arthur's was curious, tinkering, always reaching toward the unfamiliar. Ron burned steady and loyal, a banked flame. Hermione's was precise and brilliant, a laser in a room full of candles. There were others in the house too. Ginny, a sharp, bright spark like touching a live wire. The twins, no, just one twin, George. His signature slightly dulled, slightly wrong, and Harry's gut clenched because he didn't know why yet. Lupin's wolfish magic, contained and controlled, was in the kitchen. Tonks beside him, her metamorph-magus nature making her signature shimmer and shift like an oil slick on water. Harry stood and caught his reflection in the small mirror over Ron's dresser. He looked the same, messy black hair, scar, glasses on the nightstand. But when he met his own eyes, they were green again. Normal green. The scarlet glow had retreated in sleep, and for a moment he wondered if the whole thing had been a dream. Then he reached for his wand on the nightstand, and the wand flew to his hand before his fingers got within 6 inches of it, trailing a wisp of scarlet light. Not a dream. He dressed quickly, jeans, a shirt that had been Ron's 3 sizes ago, trainers with the soles coming loose, and headed downstairs. The burrow's staircase was a hazard on the best of days, narrow and crooked with steps that changed height seemingly at random. Harry navigated it on autopilot, one hand on the banister, and paused on the landing above the kitchen. Can't just let him waltz into the ministry, Molly. That's not a plan, that's a suicide note. He destroyed 7 Death Eaters in his pyjamas, Alastor. Perhaps our definition of suicide needs updating. Power isn't the same as judgment, and the boy is 17. He is right there, Harry said from the landing, and both of them looked up. He came down the last flight and into the kitchen. It was crowded. Molly at the stove, Moody at the table with a map spread before him, Lupin nursing tea, Tonks sitting on the counter swinging her legs, and Ron and Hermione crammed together on the bench by the window with books piled between them. Hermione had apparently raided every magical theory text in the burrow and was cross-referencing something with furious intensity. Morning, Harry said. Afternoon, Ron corrected, tossing him a bread roll. You slept through breakfast and 11s. Mum's been stress cooking since dawn. Someone has to feed you all, Molly said tightly, flipping bacon with more force than strictly necessary. Sit down, Harry, you need to eat. Harry caught the roll, pulled out a chair and sat. The scarlet energy hummed beneath his skin, dormant but present like an engine idling. He felt rested. Clear. The flood of memories from last night had settled into something more manageable, still vast, still overwhelming in scope, but organized now, filed away where he could access them without being drowned. Where's everyone else? He asked. Dad's at the ministry, keeping up appearances for as long as he can, Ron said. Ginny's in the garden with George. Bill and Fleur are at Shell Cottage working on wedding logistics because apparently the world ending doesn't cancel a wedding. It does not, Molly said firmly. Moody leaned forward, both eyes fixed on Harry. Potter, we need to talk about what you can do. Good. Harry took a bite of the roll. I've been thinking about that. So have I. Moody pulled a piece of parchment from inside his coat and slapped it on the table. Harry recognized Mad Eye's handwriting, cramped, paranoid, every a tiny eye. I've been an aura for 40 years. I've seen dark wizards, magical creatures, and things that'd curl your hair worse than it already is. I have never seen anyone do what you did last night. Dissolving, killing curses, deconstructing fiend fire, walking through solid walls. Those aren't wizard abilities, Potter. Those aren't even theoretically possible within the known magical framework. They're not wizard abilities, Harry agreed. They're chaos magic. And what, precisely, is chaos magic? Harry paused. The answer was in his head, layered in the memories Wanda had encoded, unlocking in stages, each new piece clicking into place like a puzzle assembling itself. He reached for the relevant knowledge and it came willingly. Wizarding magic works through established channels, Harry said. Wand movements, incantations, intent, you're accessing a pre-existing magical field and directing it through learned patterns. It's powerful, it's flexible, but it's bound by rules. Laws. Gamp's law, the unforgivable limitations, the reason you can't conjure food or bring back the dead. Those aren't arbitrary, they're structural limits built into the system. Hermione's quill was moving so fast it was a blur. Chaos magic doesn't use the system, Harry continued. It operates underneath it. Reality, physical reality, magical reality, all of it is built on a substrate, a foundation layer. Call it probability, call it the quantum foam, call it the source code. Chaos magic accesses that layer directly. It doesn't redirect existing magical energy through established pathways. It rewrites the pathways themselves. Silence. Moody's magical eye had stopped moving entirely, which Harry had never seen happen before. So when you dissolved that killing curse, Lupin said slowly, you didn't block it or absorb it. You changed the rules that allowed it to exist, locally, temporarily. The curse was built on the principle that certain magical constructs can sever the connection between soul and body. I told reality that principle didn't apply in that specific space at that specific moment. The curse had nothing to run on, it just stopped being. That's insane, Ron said. Bit yeah. And you can do that with any magic. Tonks asked from the counter, her hair cycling through colours the way it did when she was agitated. Just turn off the rules. It's not that simple. I can't just wave my hand and cancel all magic everywhere. It's more like surgery, precise interventions at the fundamental level. And it takes concentration and power and understanding. I can't rewrite a rule I don't understand. Last night, with the killing curse, I acted on instinct. The chaos magic responded to the threat before I consciously decided anything. But to do it deliberately, consistently, I need to actually comprehend what I'm altering. Which means, Hermione said, looking up from her notes with blazing eyes, that your power scales with your knowledge. The more you understand about how magic works at a fundamental level, the more precisely you can manipulate it. Harry pointed at her. Exactly. Merlin's pants, Hermione, you look like Christmas came early, Ron muttered. This is the most significant development in magical theory in recorded history, Ronald. Excuse me for being engaged. Moody rapped his knuckles on the table. Theory later. Application now. Potter, I want to see what you can do. Controlled conditions. The orchard out back has enough space and the wards should contain anything short of what I can do, probably, Harry said. But we can be careful, I want to test this too. They moved outside. The July sun was high and hot, the Burrows garden a riot of magical and mundane plants competing for space. Beyond the vegetable patch and the broom shed, the Weasleys' small apple orchard offered a clearing roughly the size of a Quidditch pitch, bordered by gnarled trees heavy with early fruit. The group spread out, Moody positioning himself behind a conjured barricade with his wand ready, Lupin and Tonks to the flanks, Ron and Hermione at a distance that Molly had insisted upon, and they had immediately halved when she went back inside. George had drifted over from wherever he'd been, and Harry saw now why his magical signature felt wrong. A bandage covered the side of his head where an ear should be. Snape's curse, Harry realised, and filed away another item on the long list of things to deal with. Ginny stood at the edge of the orchard, arms crossed, watching with an expression Harry couldn't quite read. They hadn't spoken yet. He felt the weight of that unspoken conversation pressing at the edge of his awareness, but it would have to wait. Start simple, Moody commanded. Levitation. No wand. Harry held out his hand, palm up, and looked at one of the fallen apples in the grass. He wanted it to rise, and the chaos magic translated that want into reality. The apple floated upward, trailing a faint wisp of scarlet, and hovered at eye level. Fine, now the tree. Harry shifted his focus. The nearest apple tree, trunk as thick as his torso, roots deep, probably 100 years old, lifted smoothly out of the ground. Soil cascaded from its roots. It rose 10 feet, 20, and hung there, slowly rotating, every leaf undisturbed, as steady as if it were sitting on solid ground. No visible effort, Lupin noted quietly. There wasn't. Harry felt the power expenditure the way he might feel the effort of picking up a glass of water. Present but trivial. He set the tree back down gently, roots settling into their original impressions in the earth, the soil knitted back together. Within seconds it looked as though the tree had never moved. Now, Moody said, I want to see combat applications. Lupin, Tonks, throw curses at him. Non-lethal. Mix of jinxes and hexes, varied trajectory. Potter, defend yourself. Lupin and Tonks exchanged a glance. Then Lupin raised his wand and snapped off a stunning spell without warning, fast, no telegraph, the red bolt streaking across the clearing. Harry's hand came up, and the stunner stopped dead 3 feet from his chest, suspended in a bubble of scarlet light. A heartbeat later, Tonks fired a body bind from his right flank, and he caught that too, didn't even look at it, just felt it coming and extended his awareness to intercept. Faster, Harry said. They obliged. Lupin and Tonks fell into a rhythm, stunners, impediment jinxes, reductos, bat-bogey hexes, everything short of unforgivables. They fired in tandem, staggered, overlapping, testing his ability to handle multiple simultaneous threats. The curses came in 3s and 4s from different angles at different speeds. Harry stopped them all, every single one. Some he caught in bubbles of scarlet energy, leaving them floating harmlessly in the air like coloured lanterns. Others he simply unmade, the curses dissolving into sparks before they reached him. One reducto he didn't block at all, he redirected it, bending its trajectory with a gesture so it curved past him and blasted an already dead stump into splinters. He wasn't even breathing hard. That's defense. Moody said. His voice was carefully neutral, but his magical eye was spinning like a top. Now offense. Hit the stump, whatever you've got. Harry turned to the remains of the stump Tonks's redirected curse had splintered. He raised his hand, and the scarlet energy gathered, not in a bolt or a beam, but in a concentrated pulse that left his palm with a sound like tearing silk. The stump ceased to exist. Not exploded, ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. No debris, no splinters, no scorch mark, just a shallow depression in the earth where the roots had been. The clearing was very quiet. What did you just do to it? George asked from the sidelines, his voice carrying the ghost of his usual humour. Only I was quite attached to that stump. Emotionally. Molecular disassembly, Harry said, and then heard himself and shook his head. I took it apart, down to the atoms, scattered them into the air. Right, cool, I'm going to go stand a bit further back now. Harry. Hermione called out, her voice tight with something between excitement and worry. Can you create, not just destroy or defend, can you build something? Harry considered. The memories whispered, and he listened. Wanda had created. In her most powerful moments, she'd built entire realities, cities and people and lives woven from nothing but will and chaos magic. Harry wasn't there yet, might never be there, but the principle was the same. Chaos magic could disassemble, yes, but it could also compose. He knelt and pressed his palm to the bare earth where the stump had been. Scarlet light seeped from his hand into the soil, and he thought about what he wanted. Not in words, but in images, in feelings, in the deep biological understanding of what a tree was at its most fundamental level. The ground rumbled. A shoot pushed up through the dirt, pale green, fragile, questing. It thickened as it rose, bark forming in real time, branches unfurling like arms stretching after a long sleep. Leaves budded and opened, deep green and glossy. In 30 seconds, a new apple tree stood where the stump had been, full-grown, healthy, already bearing fruit. Harry stood and plucked an apple from the lowest branch, took a bite. It was crisp and sweet and entirely real. That violates about 7 fundamental laws of transfiguration. Hermione said faintly, It's not transfiguration. I didn't transform existing matter. I pulled raw material from the air and soil and organized it according to the pattern of an apple tree. The atoms were already there, carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen. I just told them where to go. You told atoms where to go, in a manner of speaking. Ron took the apple from Harry's hand, examined it suspiciously, and took a bite. He chewed, swallowed, and shrugged. Good apple. Ron, he just grew that from nothing and you're reviewing the flavour. I'm being supportive, Hermione. Also, it's a really good apple. They kept going. For 3 hours, under Moody's relentless direction, Harry pushed and probed and tested the boundaries of his power. He discovered he could shield multiple people simultaneously, wrapping scarlet barriers around individual targets that moved with them as they walked. He could fly, not on a broom, but under his own power, scarlet energy lifting him smoothly into the air, the wind in his hair and the burrow shrinking below him and the whole of Ottery-St. Catchpole spread out like a map. He could sense magical signatures at enormous distances, the landscape lighting up in his perception like a city seen from orbit, every witch and wizard a point of light, every magical creature a different hue. He could feel the ley lines running deep underground, rivers of raw magical energy that the burrow had been built on top of, probably not coincidentally. He tested his limits and found them, in a sense, not hard walls, but thresholds of concentration. The more complex the manipulation, the more focus it required. Disassembling a stump was trivial. Growing a tree required sustained attention. Simultaneously shielding 8 people, while redirecting multiple curses and maintaining flight was possible, but demanded the kind of focus that left his temples throbbing. Your bottleneck isn't power, Moody concluded, standing over his parchment where he'd been taking notes with the obsessive detail of a man who'd survived 4 decades of dark wizard combat. It's processing. You've got the magical equivalent of unlimited ammunition, but limited attention. Multiple complex tasks at once stretch you. For now, Harry said. It's been less than a day. The more I practice, the more intuitive it becomes. The basic stuff, shielding, telekinesis, sensing, is already almost automatic. Give me a week and the complex stuff will be too. We may not have a week. Then I'll learn fast. Moody studied him, then nodded once. You'll do. Coming from Mad-Eye Moody, that was practically a standing ovation. The group dispersed for a late lunch that Molly had somehow prepared despite spending half the morning watching from the kitchen window, with her hand pressed over her mouth. Harry found himself at the long table in the garden, surrounded by Weasleys and Order members, eating roast chicken and potatoes while the conversation swirled around him. It felt surreal. Yesterday, less than 24 hours ago, he'd been sitting alone in a cupboard-sized bedroom at Privet Drive, dreading the dangerous transfer and the uncertain future. Now he was sitting in the sun, full of power he was only beginning to understand, surrounded by people who were looking at him with a mix of awe and nervousness and stubborn love. Ginny sat down across from him. She'd been keeping her distance all morning, watching the demonstrations from the edge of the orchard with her arms folded and her expression unreadable. But now she dropped into the chair opposite and fixed him with a look that was pure Weasley, direct, unflinching, and not remotely intimidated. So, she said. So, Harry said. Interdimensional chaos witch for a mother, reality warping superpowers, eyes that glow red when you're emotional. Anything else I should know about, or is that the full list? That's pretty much the lot, yeah. Right. She reached across the table, took his glass of pumpkin juice, drank half of it and set it back down. Just so we're clear, you breaking up with me at the funeral was stupid. I understood why you did it, and it was still stupid. But the reasons you did it, protecting me, keeping me safe from Voldemort, those reasons just got significantly more stupid, given that you can apparently catch killing curses with your bare hands. Harry opened his mouth. I'm not finished. I'm not asking you to get back together with me right now. We're in the middle of a war, you've just gone through something massive, and you need to figure out who you are before you figure out who you're with. I get that. But when the war's over, and it will be over, because I've seen what you can do and Tom Riddle doesn't stand a chance, we're going to have a conversation. A real one. She stood, took the last roast potato off his plate and walked away. Harry watched her go, a complicated warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with chaos magic. Ron, sitting beside him, leaned over. She's been rehearsing that since breakfast, Ron said. I know because she practiced on me first and it was significantly more threatening. Harry laughed. It felt good. Normal. The red energy hummed contentedly under his skin and he let it. The afternoon was consumed by planning and preparation. Harry spent 2 hours walking the burrow's perimeter, examining the existing wards with his new senses and reinforcing them with layers of chaos magic. It was delicate work. He didn't want to overwhelm the existing protections, which were keyed to the Weasley family's magical signatures and had centuries of accumulated strength. Instead, he wove his scarlet energy through the existing framework, strengthening the weak points, filling the gaps, adding a substrate of reality anchoring power that would make the wards resistant to virtually any magical assault. Hermione walked with him, notebook in hand, asking questions that forced him to articulate what he was doing in ways that deepened his own understanding. The chaos magic isn't replacing the wards, Harry explained, his hands extended, scarlet light threading from his fingers into the invisible barrier surrounding the property. It's reinforcing the reality they're built on. Think of the wards as a fence. Normal attacks try to break the fence. What I'm doing is making the ground the fence posts are set in harder, denser, more real. A curse hits these wards now, and it's not just fighting the magical barrier, it's fighting the fundamental structure of local space-time. You're reinforcing the ontological stability of the protected area. Hermione said, her quill flying. Yes, that's a much better way of saying it. Harry, do you realize you're essentially performing localized reality anchoring? There are theoretical papers about this, mostly dismissed as impossible, but the concept appears in advanced arithmetic models as a hypothetical defense against reality-altering magic, Harry finished, the knowledge surfacing from his mother's encoded memories. Yeah. Wanda knew about threats that could warp or rewrite reality. Beings with that kind of power existed in her world. The chaos magic she gave me includes instinctive defenses against exactly that kind of attack. What kinds of beings? Harry paused, the memories flickering. Images that didn't quite make sense yet, vast, cosmic, entities that existed outside normal space-time. He shook his head. I'm still unpacking those memories. Bits and pieces. I'll tell you when I have a clearer picture. Hermione nodded, made a note, and moved on. That was the thing about Hermione. She could be relentlessly curious without being pushy. She knew when to dig and when to wait. By evening, the Burrows wards were transformed. To normal wizarding perception, they probably looked the same, the usual shimmer of protective enchantment, maybe slightly stronger than before. But to Harry's senses, the property now sat inside a sphere of reinforced reality that would shrug off anything short of a full-scale military assault by dozens of coordinated wizards. A single Death Eater, or even a small squad, would bounce off it like a tennis ball off a castle wall. Nothing's getting through that, Harry told Molly, who'd been watching from the kitchen door. Not Death Eaters, not ministry officials, not Voldemort himself, unless he brings his entire force and sits down for a week-long siege. The wedding is safe. Molly's eyes were bright. Thank you, Harry. It's the least I can do. You've fed me for 6 years. She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, pulled him into a hug that crushed his ribs, and retreated to the kitchen before anyone could see her cry. That night, after the house settled and the only sounds were the ghoul clanking in the attic and the distant hooting of a barn owl, Harry sat alone in the garden. The stars were out, brilliant in the country darkness, unpolluted by city light, and the air was warm and smelled of grass and Molly's herb garden. His hands rested on his knees, scarlet energy flickering between his fingers like a candle flame. He was looking inward. The Horcrux in his scar was a constant irritation now, a dark, squirming presence pressed against his consciousness, impossible to ignore with his enhanced awareness. Before the awakening, he'd lived with it for 16 years without knowing it was there. The way you live with a low-grade headache so persistent you forget what normal feels like. Now he could feel every tendril of it, every root it had sunk into his magical core, the parasitic network of connections it had built over more than a decade of cohabitation. It was afraid of him. He could feel that clearly. The fragment of Voldemort's soul had spent 16 years nestled in a host whose power it could leech from, whose emotions it could influence, whose connection to its originator it could maintain. Now the host had become something the fragment couldn't comprehend, and its survival instincts were screaming. Harry closed his eyes and went deeper. The interior landscape of his own magic was vast and strange. His wizarding core was there, the familiar warmth of his Holy Wand's power, the well he'd drawn from for 6 years of spellcasting. But it was dwarfed now by the chaos magic, an ocean of scarlet light that extended in every direction, deep and turbulent and alive, responding to his attention by surging toward him like a dog greeting its owner. And there, tangled in the junction between the two systems, the Horcrux. It looked, to his inner eye, like a knot of black thorns wrapped around a tumor of oily darkness. Tendrils extended from it into his wizarding core, thin as spider silk but strong, siphoning magical energy in tiny, imperceptible amounts. Other tendrils reached toward his mind, and Harry recognized them now as the channels through which Voldemort's emotions had leaked into his dreams and visions for years. He reached for it with the chaos magic, and the Horcrux shrieked. Chapter 3. The hunt begins 3 days later. Harry stood in the Weasleys' orchard at dawn and watched Bill Weasley marry Fleur de Lacquer under a canopy of golden light. The ceremony was beautiful. Fleur's Velar heritage lent the proceedings an otherworldly glow. Literally, her skin luminous in the morning sun, her silver blonde hair catching the light like spun moonlight. Bill stood tall beside her, the scar's greyback had given him visible but unhidden, and when he said his vows, his voice was steady and sure and full of the quiet courage that ran through every Weasley like iron through bedrock. Molly cried. Arthur cried. Ginny pretended not to cry and Hermione didn't bother pretending. Ron leaned toward Harry during the vows. If I ever get married, remind me to do it when there isn't a war on. Less stressful. Noted, Harry whispered back. The reception unfolded in the garden, enchanted marquee billowing in a breeze that smelled of flowers and cake. Guests mingled, order members, Weasley relatives, a handful of Fleur's French family who had either not heard about the war or didn't care. Music played. People danced. For a few hours, the world pretended to be normal, and Harry let it. He'd spent the last 3 days doing 3 things: training, reinforcing wards, and removing the Horcrux. The removal had happened on the second night. Alone in the garden, under the stars, with Ron and Hermione standing 20 feet away, because they'd refused to leave and Harry had given up arguing. He'd gone inward, found the dark knot of Voldemort's soul tangled in his magical core, and begun the painstaking process of separating it from himself. It had been the hardest thing he'd ever done. Not because of the power required, the chaos magic was more than sufficient, but because the Horcrux had been part of him for 16 years. Its roots were wrapped around memories, emotions, aspects of his identity that he'd always assumed were his own. The rage he sometimes felt, the darkness at the edges of his temper, the strange affinity for Parseltongue, all of it threaded through with Voldemort's soul like mold through bread. Separating the parasite from the host without damaging the host required precision on a molecular level, teasing apart connections one by one, and the Horcrux fought him every step of the way. It screamed. It bargained. It showed him visions, Voldemort's memories, offered like bribes, secrets of dark magic whispered in Parseltongue. It tried to convince him it was part of him, that removing it would leave him diminished, less than whole. Harry had listened to the fragment's desperate lies with something close to pity, and then pulled it free like a splinter from under a fingernail. The moment of separation was agony, a white-hot tearing sensation that radiated from his scar through his entire body, and then it was over. The dark fragment hung in the air before him, suspended in a cage of scarlet light, writhing and formless and pathetic. A seventh of a soul, a broken piece of a broken man, clinging to existence through sheer malice. Harry had looked at it for a long moment. Then he closed his fist, and the chaos magic unmade it. Not destroyed in the way fiendfire or basilisk venom would destroy a Horcrux. Those methods overwhelmed the soul fragment with destructive energy. The chaos magic simply revoked its right to exist, rewriting the local rules of reality so that the fragment's spiritual coherence dissolved like sugar in hot water. One moment it was there. The next it wasn't, not banished, not transferred. Erased somewhere. Harry knew Voldemort had felt it. Another anchor severed, another piece of his immortality crumbling. His scar didn't hurt anymore. For the first time in 6 years it was just a scar. Ron had broken the silence afterward. Did it work? Harry had touched his forehead, feeling the smooth, painless skin, no squirming darkness. No foreign presence, just himself, whole and clean for the first time in his life. Yeah, he'd said. It worked. Hermione had burst into tears and hugged him so hard his ribs creaked. Ron had clapped him on the back and said, "One down then," and that had been that. Now, at the wedding reception, Harry stood at the edge of the dance floor with a glass of champagne he wasn't drinking and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, not the grim, teeth-gritted determination that had carried him through the last year. Actual hope. The warm, expanding kind that makes you think maybe the future isn't just a series of disasters waiting to happen. 2 Horcruxes destroyed, the one in his scar and the diary Tom Riddle had left with Lucius Malfoy, which Harry had killed in the Chamber of Secrets 5 years ago. The ring Dumbledore had destroyed in the summer. That left 3, Slytherin's locket, Hufflepuff's cup, and Ravenclaw's diadem. Plus Nagini the snake, but Harry was saving that for later, 3 hidden objects and a snake. Against a wizard who could sense dark magic like a bloodhound and reshape reality with his will, Voldemort had no idea what was coming. Harry felt them before the wards did. He'd been watching Luna Lovegood explain something about Raxperts to a baffled French wizard, half smiling at her unshakable confidence in the invisible when the air changed. A pressure on the edge of his awareness, cold, purposeful, hostile. Multiple magical signatures, approaching fast from the north, and the taste of dark magic preceding them like the smell of smoke before a fire. His champagne glass shattered in his hand. Not from grip, from the surge of scarlet energy that rippled through him, instinctive, the chaos magic going from idle to full alert in a fraction of a second. Ron was beside him instantly, wand out. He'd learned to read Harry's body language over 6 years, and the sudden tension was as clear as a shout. What is it? Death Eaters, a lot of them, 20 maybe more, they're hitting the wards from the north. Harry tilted his head, feeling the pressure increase, the wards he'd reinforced flexing but holding. They've got someone strong with them, someone coordinating the assault, trying to unravel the protective enchantments. How long do the wards hold? Harry extended his senses and touched the barrier surrounding the property. His chaos magic reinforcement was solid. The Death Eaters were throwing curses at it that broke apart on contact like waves on a seawall. But the coordinator, whoever they were, was doing something more subtle. Probing the ward structure, looking for seams, applying precise magical pressure at the junction points. Good technique, methodical, patient, against the grunts forever, against whoever's leading the assault maybe 10 minutes before they find a weak point. They're smart. Hermione had materialized on his other side, wand drawn, face pale but composed. The Ministry's fallen. The taboo on Voldemort's name is probably active. Someone at the wedding might have. Doesn't matter how they found us, they're here. Harry looked across the reception, where guests were still dancing, still laughing, still beautifully unaware. He had maybe 30 seconds before the ward probing became obvious enough for other wizards to notice. He didn't need 30 seconds. Harry raised both hands and pushed. Scarlet energy erupted from him in a controlled wave, not outward toward the attackers but upward. A dome of crimson light that arced over the entire Burrow property like a second sky. It was translucent, beautiful in a terrible way, and it locked into place with a sound like a cathedral bell being struck once. Every conversation in the marquee stopped. Every head turned. The dome blazed overhead, casting the wedding in warm red light, and beyond it, visible now through the scarlet barrier, dark shapes materialized. Death Eaters apparating in formation, masks white against the darkening sky, wands raised and firing. Their curses hit the dome and died. Green light, purple light, the ugly yellow of Bonebreakers, all of it splashing against the barrier and dissolving into harmless sparks that drifted down like scarlet snow. Death Eaters. Someone screamed, and the reception dissolved into chaos, guests scrambling, drawing wands, parents grabbing children. Stay inside the dome. Harry's voice carried across the entire property, amplified without effort, resonant with power that made the air vibrate. Nobody leaves the barrier. You're safe inside it. Stay calm. Molly was already herding guests toward the house, her wand out, her face fierce. Arthur had his wand up, shielding Fleur's younger sister. Bill pulled Fleur behind him, and then Fleur stepped back beside him because she was a Triwizard Champion's wife, and she didn't stand behind anyone. Moody stumped toward Harry, magical eye locked on the dome. How long can you hold this? As long as I want. It's not going anywhere. A massive explosion rocked the northern edge of the dome, the coordinating wizard, throwing everything they had at a single point. The dome flexed, rippled, held. Harry felt the impact the way you feel someone knocking on a door, annoying, irrelevant. They're trying to break through. Harry said, his eyes glowing faintly scarlet, his gaze distant as he tracked the attackers through the barrier. 23 of them, The leader is Yaxley, and someone else, Dolohov, I think, based on the magical signature. Voldemort isn't here himself, probably testing the defenses. You can tell all that from in here, Lupin asked, wand raised, positioned protectively near Tonks. I can feel their magic. Every spell has a signature, a flavor, and I've fought Dolohov before. I recognize his style. Harry's jaw tightened. Department of Mysteries. He nearly killed Hermione. The dome pulsed brighter, and Harry took a breath, reined it in. The chaos magic responded to emotion. Anger made it volatile, aggressive. He needed precision, not rage. So what's the plan? Ron asked. His voice was steady. His ears were red. His wand was rock solid in his hand. We just wait them out. No, Harry said. I end it. Right now. He stepped forward toward the edge of the dome, and the guests parted around him like water around a stone. The scarlet light concentrated around his hands, intensifying, brightening. Through the translucent barrier, he could see the Death Eaters, 23 figures in dark robes, spread in a loose semicircle, hammering the dome with everything they had. Harry reached the barrier and pressed his palms flat against it. The dome was his creation, an extension of his will, and touching it was like touching his own skin. He could feel every curse striking it, every probe testing it, every desperate attempt to unravel its structure. He pushed his awareness through the barrier, extending the chaos magic outward. Scarlet tendrils crept across the ground beyond the dome, invisible to the attackers, spreading like roots beneath their feet. Then he clenched his fists. 23 ones ripped free of 23 hands. They shot skyward, tumbling end over end, and hung in the air 50 feet above the Death Eaters' heads, well out of reach, every single one. The Death Eaters stared up at their wands, then stared at the dome, then stared at the figure standing behind it, haloed in scarlet light, eyes blazing red. Harry dropped the dome. It didn't fade or dissolve, it retracted, pulled back into him like a breath drawn in, the red light collapsing inward and condensing around his body. He stood on the grass, unshielded, facing 23 wandless Death Eaters, and his expression was absolutely calm. Evening, Harry said. You weren't invited. Yaxley recovered first. The big wizard snarled and went for his backup wand. A lot of Death Eaters carried a spare, and Harry watched him draw it with casual interest, then flicked a finger. The backup wand snapped in half. Right, Harry said. Here's how this goes. You can apparate out. Now, all of you, go back to Voldemort and tell him what happened. Tell him what you saw. Or you can stay and test me, and I promise you on my mother's life, on both my mother's lives, you will not enjoy the result. One of the masked figures, young by the way he moved, and stupid by the way he lunged forward with a wandless curse already forming on his lips, charged. Harry raised an eyebrow. Scarlet energy lashed out like a whip, caught the man around the torso and slammed him into the ground hard enough to crater the earth. Not hard enough to kill, hard enough to make the point. Anyone else? Cracks of disapparition. 1, 2, 5, 10, the Death Eaters vanishing in rapid succession, the smart ones not waiting to see if Harry's patience had limits. In 8 seconds, 20 of them were gone. The one Harry had slammed was groaning in his crater, barely conscious. That left 2, Yaxley and Dolohov. They stood their ground, and Harry could feel why. Professional pride. These were veteran dark wizards in a circle or close to it, and running from a 17-year-old, even one who'd just done the impossible, galled them on a fundamental level. Dolohov raised his hands, showing them empty. You've made your point, Potter. Have I? Whatever you've become, whatever that was, he gestured at the space where the dome had been. The Dark Lord will know, and when he comes for you himself, it won't be 23 Death Eaters knocking on your door. It'll be something you can't catch with a fancy light show. Tell him I'm looking forward to it. Dolohov studied him for a long moment. His mask had cracked during the wand disarmament, and through the gap, Harry could see one dark eye, calculating and cold. Then the Death Eater apparated away with a crack that sounded like a bone breaking. Yaxley lingered. Of all of them, his magical signature was the angriest, a hot, acidic fury that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. You think this changes anything? Yaxley spat. You think raw power wins wars? The Dark Lord controls the ministry. He controls the press. He controls the infrastructure. You can't fight a government, Potter, no matter how many parlor tricks you've learned. Watch me, Harry said. Yaxley disappeared with a crack. Harry stood alone on the grass beyond the burrow's wards. 23 wands hanging in the air above him like a mobile. He let them fall, they clattered to the ground in a pile and turned back to the wedding. The guests were staring. All of them. Every single face turned toward him, ranging from terrified to awed to confused to something that might have been the beginning of worship, and Harry hated that last one immediately. "Sorry about the interruption," he said, walking back toward the marquee. The scarlet light faded from his eyes. He picked up a fallen champagne glass from the grass, filled it with a thought, the liquid materializing from reorganized atmospheric moisture because he'd learned to do that yesterday, and raised it, to Bill and Fleur. There was a stunned beat of silence. Then George Weasley, bless him, raised his glass from somewhere in the crowd and echoed, "To Bill and Fleur," the toast rippled outward. Glasses raised. The band, taking its cue from the room, started playing again. Slowly, tentatively, the reception reassembled itself around the still warm crater in the lawn, and if the laughter was a bit louder and more desperate than before, well, that was war for you. Molly reached Harry first. She grabbed him by the shoulders, looked him up and down for injuries, found none, and said, "You could have at least let them get past the hors d'oeuvres. I'll time it better next time." She smacked his arm and pulled him into a hug. 2 hours later, after the cake was cut and the last dance was danced, and Bill and Fleur disapparated to Shell Cottage for a honeymoon that would last approximately 12 hours before the war pulled them back, Harry sat in the Weasley kitchen with Ron and Hermione and a pot of tea. "Tomorrow," Harry said. "Tomorrow," Ron agreed. Hermione unfolded a piece of parchment on which she'd drawn a neat diagram of their known intelligence on the remaining Horcruxes. "The locket is at the Ministry around Umbridge's neck. The cup is in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. Harry, you sensed that yesterday during your range testing. The diadem you said is at Hogwarts, but the signal was faint and you couldn't pinpoint the location. Nagini is with Voldemort." Harry nodded. "The locket's easiest to reach. The Ministry is public, it's right there in the middle of London. And I can feel the locket's signature now that I know what I'm looking for. It's ugly like all of them, a wound in the fabric of reality. And your plan is to just walk in," Ron said, not questioning, confirming. "I could sneak in. Polyjuice, invisibility cloak, the whole routine, but it would take time we don't have, and there's a risk of being discovered that puts us in a worse position than going in openly." Harry sipped his tea. "More importantly, the wizarding world needs to see that Voldemort doesn't own everything. The Ministry fell, and everyone's terrified. If Harry Potter walks into the Ministry of Magic and takes what he wants and walks out again, that's not just a tactical win. It's a message. That message being don't mess with Harry Potter," Ron said. "That message being Voldemort isn't invincible and neither are his people." Harry set down his cup. "Fear is his biggest weapon, bigger than the Death Eaters, bigger than the Dementors, bigger than any curse. People are afraid to resist because they think resistance is suicide. I can show them it isn't." Hermione studied her diagram, chewing her lower lip. "The Ministry will be full of people, Harry. Not just Death Eaters, regular Ministry employees, people under the Imperious, people who are just trying to survive by keeping their heads down. If things go sideways, they won't. I'm not going in to fight. I'm going in to take the locket and leave. Anyone who doesn't get in my way won't even know I was there until it's over. And Umbridge," Ron's voice had gone flat. They all had reasons to hate Dolores Umbridge, but Ron's ran deep. She'd poisoned his 5th year, tortured Harry with a blood quill, and tried to have Hagrid killed. "What happens when she doesn't want to hand over her pretty necklace? Then I take it anyway." Harry smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Gently. The morning came grey and drizzling, a proper English summer rain that turned the Burrow's garden to mud and made the chickens look even more disgusted than usual. Harry dressed in clean clothes, the closest thing to presentable he owned, and met Ron and Hermione in the kitchen at 7 sharp. Molly had laid out breakfast. She hadn't said a word about their plans, but the amount of food on the table suggested she knew exactly what they were doing and was responding the only way she knew how. Eggs, bacon, toast, sausages, grilled tomatoes, black pudding, a full pot of tea, and a plate of pastries that were still warm from the oven. "Eat," she said. "All of it." They ate. Harry found that the chaos magic, for all its cosmic power, did nothing to reduce the mundane need for calories, and after 3 days of intensive magical training, he was ravenous. He cleared 2 plates and was reaching for a third before Hermione kicked him under the table. "We should go." Harry nodded, wiped his mouth and stood. "Mrs. Weasley, thank you for everything." Molly's eyes were bright and her jaw was set in the way that meant she was holding back something enormous through sheer force of maternal will. "You bring them back safe, Harry Potter." "I will." Ron hugged his mother, and something passed between them that didn't need words, a squeeze of the hand, a look. Hermione hugged her too, and Molly whispered something in her ear that made Hermione's eyes fill with tears. She blinked away furiously. They stepped into the garden. The rain had eased to a mist, the kind that gets you soaked without you noticing. "Ready?" Harry asked. "No," Ron said. "Let's go." Harry reached out and found the Ministry's magical signature, that dense, institutional knot of bureaucratic enchantment in the heart of London, unmistakable in its complexity. He wrapped scarlet energy around all 3 of them. Ron flinched, then relaxed as the warm tingle settled and they moved. It wasn't apparition. Apparition was a tube, a squeeze, a pop of displaced air. This was different. Harry folded the space between the Burrow and London like closing a book, and they stepped from one page to the other. No sound, no sensation beyond a brief warmth and a flash of red. One moment they were in the Weasleys' garden. The next, they were standing in a side alley 2 blocks from the Ministry's visitor entrance. Ron staggered, caught himself, and said, "That is significantly better than apparition." "No squeezing," Hermione agreed, looking faintly delighted despite her nerves. Harry oriented himself. The Ministry was close. He could feel it pulsing, a massive concentration of magical energy underground, hundreds of witches and wizards packed into its corridors like ants in a hill. And among them, one particular signature, dark, oily, familiar, the Horcrux. Slytherin's locket, broadcasting its corrupted presence like a radio tower. "It's there," Harry said. "Underground, I can feel it. Umbridge has its sheaths in a courtroom level 10. There's something happening." "A trial. Muggle-born registration," Hermione said bitterly. "It's already started then. They're rounding up Muggle-borns and putting them on trial for stealing magic." The air around Harry crackled, scarlet motes sparking into existence and dying. He took a breath and smoothed them away. "Then we stop that too." "Harry," Hermione started. "We're not walking past people being persecuted for their blood status, Hermione. Not today, not ever." He met her eyes. "You of all people shouldn't have to argue with me about this." Her jaw tightened. Chapter 4. The world breaks through. The Horcrux screamed when it died. They were in a safe house, a cramped flat above a shuttered bookshop in Canterbury that Lupin had arranged through contacts who didn't ask questions, and the locket hung from Harry's fist by its chain, thrashing like a living thing. Slytherin's serpentine S caught the lamplight as it bucked and twisted, and from inside the gold casing came a sound like metal grinding against metal, a shriek pitched at the frequency of nightmares. Ron and Hermione stood behind him, wands drawn. The flat smelled of old paper and dust and the ozone tang of chaos magic. "Just do it," Ron said. His face was tight. He'd carried the locket in his pocket during the walk from the apparition point, and even in those 20 minutes, it had gotten to him, whispered things in a voice only he could hear, plucked at his insecurities like a bored child pulling wings off a fly. He'd shoved it at Harry with hands that shook and said nothing, and Harry hadn't made him explain. Harry looked at the locket. He could feel the soul fragment inside, identical in nature to the one he'd pulled from his own scar, the same oily wrongness, the same desperate clinging to existence. But this one was stronger, older, housed in a purpose-built vessel rather than a living host. It had defenses. He could feel them, layers of dark enchantment wrapped around the Horcrux like the petals of a poisonous flower, each one designed to corrupt or destroy whoever tried to open it. He opened it anyway. Scarlet light flowed from his hand into the locket's seam, and the clasp yielded with a click that resonated far deeper than the physical, a lock on reality itself, turning. The locket fell open. Inside, behind 2 windows of dirty glass, 2 eyes blinked. Tom Riddle's eyes, dark and handsome and full of malice. The Horcrux played its last card. Smoke poured from the open locket, black, acrid, taking shape. 2 figures formed, translucent and terrible. Hermione wrapped around a shadowy Harry, whispering that Ron was nothing, would always be nothing, that she'd never chosen him and never would. It was aimed at Ron like a guided missile. targeted at the wound it had been picking at for 20 minutes, and Ron made a strangled sound. Harry didn't give it time to land. He closed his fist around the locket, and the chaos magic ate it alive. The scarlet energy plunged through the open casing, through the dark enchantments, through the soul fragment's defenses, and reached the core, that fractured piece of Tom Riddle's soul, and unmade it with the same precise, reality-revoking power he'd used on the fragment in his scar. The smoke figures disintegrated. The screaming stopped. The locket went still in his hand, just metal now, just gold, the dark presence inside it simply gone. Harry dropped the empty locket on the table. It clattered inert. Ron was breathing hard, staring at the spot where the smoke Hermione had been. Hermione herself stood very still, her cheeks flushed. "That was cruel," Ron said quietly. "That's what they do," Harry said. "They find the thing you're afraid of and they use it. It wasn't real, Ron." "I know it wasn't real," Ron's jaw worked. "Doesn't mean it didn't hurt." Hermione crossed the room and took Ron's hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Ron looked at their intertwined fingers, and some of the tension drained from his shoulders. "3 down," Hermione said. "The diary, the ring, the scar fragment, and now the locket. That's 4, actually. The cup, the diadem, and Nagini left. And then Voldemort himself," Harry said. He moved to the flat single window and looked out at Canterbury's rooftops. The afternoon sun was fighting through clouds, casting the medieval city in patches of gold and grey. Somewhere out there, the wizarding world was reeling from what he'd done this morning. The Ministry raid had gone exactly as planned, and then it had gone further. Harry replayed it in his mind, not to gloat, but to analyse, to learn, to understand the ripple effects of what he'd set in motion. They'd entered through the visitor entrance, the ridiculous red telephone box that descended into the atrium. Harry hadn't bothered with disguises. He'd walked in wearing his own face, flanked by Ron and Hermione, and the first witch who'd seen him, a middle-aged woman at the security desk, had dropped her coffee. "Harry Potter," she'd whispered. "But they said you were still here," Harry had said. "Excuse me." He'd walked past her, through the atrium, and every head had turned. The massive hall was crowded with morning commuters, Ministry employees shuffling to their departments, eyes down, shoulders hunched, the body language of people living under occupation. The new regime's propaganda was everywhere. Banners reading "Magic is might," a grotesque statue of wizards sitting on thrones of crushed muggles replacing the old fountain. Harry had looked at the statue for 3 seconds. Then he'd raised his hand, and the scarlet light had sheared through it like a blade through cobwebs. The statue collapsed, not dramatically, not explosively, but thoroughly, every piece of it disassembling into its component materials and scattering into dust. The base remained empty, and the sound of the statue's dissolution echoed through the silent atrium. Nobody moved. 200 witches and wizards stood frozen, staring at the empty plinth, staring at the teenage boy wreathed in fading red light who just destroyed the symbol of the new regime as casually as crumpling a piece of parchment. "Morning," Harry had said to the atrium at large, and kept walking. They'd made it to the lifts without resistance. The few auras on duty had reached for their wands and then thought better of it. Not because Harry threatened them, but because the sheer presence of his power, the weight of it in the air, made confrontation feel like standing in front of a freight train and daring it to stop. Level 10. The courtrooms. Harry had felt the locket's pull growing stronger as they descended, and alongside it, something else, the concentrated misery of dozens of people crammed into holding cells, their magic dampened, their spirits crushed. Muggleborns awaiting trial, awaiting condemnation. The courtroom doors had been sealed with Ministry enchantments. Harry dissolved them with a touch. Inside, Dolores Umbridge, sitting on a raised dais in a courtroom packed with Dementors, wearing a pink cardigan and Slytherin's locket, and the expression of a woman who had found her calling in the systematic persecution of people she considered subhuman. Below her, in the defendant's chair, a woman Harry didn't recognize, small, terrified, her wand confiscated, chains binding her to the seat. Umbridge had looked up when the doors opened. Her toad-like face had gone through surprise, recognition, and outrage in rapid succession. "Harry Potter. You are interrupting official Ministry proceedings." Auras seize. Harry had raised his hand, and every Dementor in the courtroom stopped moving, not Patronus repelled, not driven back. Stopped, frozen in place mid-glide, their rattling breath cutting off like a switch had been thrown. The temperature in the room had shot up 20 degrees as the soul-sucking cold vanished, and the accused witch in the chair had gasped, colour flooding back into her face. Harry had looked at the Dementors with curiosity more than anything. To his chaos magic senses, they were fascinating, beings of pure negative emotion, entropy given form, existing in a parasitic relationship with the reality around them. They fed on happiness by locally increasing the probability of despair. Elegant in a horrible way. And absolutely, trivially within his power to neutralize. "You can go," he'd told the Dementors, and the words carried the weight of chaos magic behind them, not a suggestion but a rewriting of their behavioral parameters. The Dementors had shuddered, their formless bodies rippling, and then they'd fled. Through the walls, through the ceiling, out of the ministry entirely, scattering into the sky above London like dark birds startled from a tree. They wouldn't come back. He'd altered them at a fundamental level, not destroyed them, but removed their ability to feed on human emotion. They'd drift now, harmless, purposeless, until they dissipated naturally. A century-old weapon of terror neutralized in 5 seconds, Umbridge had gone white. Not afraid, not yet, her arrogance was too deep for that, but shaken, her authority challenged in a way she couldn't process. "You have no right." Harry had walked down the courtroom steps, past the empty chains where a dozen Muggle-borns had been shackled before this particular trial, past the scribe's desk where a quick quotes quill had been transcribing the proceedings in gleeful detail, and stopped directly in front of the dais. "The locket," he'd said, "take it off. This is a family heirloom, it's a piece of Voldemort's soul, and you've been wearing it around your neck like jewelry. Take it off." The name made her flinch. But Umbridge had gripped the locket possessively, her stubby fingers closing around it, and Harry saw in her eyes the Horcrux's influence, the way it had burrowed into her already considerable cruelty and amplified it, fed it, given it a dark energy that made her persecution of Muggle-borns feel righteous rather than monstrous. He hadn't asked a third time. The scarlet light had reached out, delicate as a surgeon's hand, and unclasped the chain at the back of her neck. The locket floated free, drifting through the air to Harry's waiting palm, and Umbridge had shuddered as its influence left her, not remorseful, not repentant, but diminished, like a balloon with a slow leak. "These trials are over," Harry had told her. "The Muggle-born Registration Commission is over. Anyone currently in holding is released immediately. You can't the Ministry. The Ministry has fallen to a dark wizard who's using it to persecute innocent people. You know that. Everyone in this building knows that. The only question is whether you keep pretending you don't." Harry had leaned in, and the scarlet light in his eyes had flared. "Go home, Professor Umbridge, while you still can." She'd gone. Not with dignity. She'd scrambled off the dais and fled through a side door, her pink heels clicking on the stone, and Harry had let her go because she wasn't worth more of his time. He'd freed the accused witch from the chair with a wave of his hand. She'd stared at him like he was a hallucination. "You're Harry Potter. Yes, can you walk?" Yes, I can walk." "Then walk out of here, all of you." He'd raised his voice, and it carried through the walls, through the floors, reaching every holding cell on level 10 where Muggle-borns sat in chains. The chains opened, every single one simultaneously, scarlet light touching every lock in the level and turning it. "The doors are open. Go home. If anyone tries to stop you, tell them Harry Potter said the trials are over." They'd poured out. Dozens of them, scared, confused, blinking in the sudden light, some crying, some running. Ministry employees in the corridors had flattened themselves against the walls as the freed prisoners passed, and not one of them had tried to intervene. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had walked back to the lifts. Ron was grinning so hard his face looked like it might split. Hermione was crying and didn't seem to care. The locket was in Harry's pocket, pulsing with malice but contained, powerless against the chaos magic wrapped around it. In the atrium, where the Magic Is Might statue had been, Harry had paused. The empty plinth stood in the centre of the hall, surrounded by scattered dust. Hundreds of eyes watched him. He'd considered saying something. A speech, a declaration, a rallying cry, but speeches weren't really his style, and the empty plinth said more than words could. He'd walked out through the visitor entrance, and they'd disappeared from the telephone box before anyone thought to follow. That had been 6 hours ago. The wizarding world would be on fire by now. Harry, Hermione's voice pulled him out of the replay. She was sitting at the flat's small table, the destroyed locket before her, her notebook open to a page dense with calculations. "I've been thinking about the cup," she said. "The Hufflepuff cup in the Lestrange vault. Gringotts won't be like the Ministry. The goblins are neutral. They don't serve Voldemort, but they don't serve us either. Their security is ancient, layered, and based on principles fundamentally different from wizarding magic. Dragon-guarded vaults, thief's downfall, enchantments that have been refined over centuries." "I know." Harry sat down across from her. Ron pulled up a chair beside them, balancing it on two legs the way he always did. "I've been feeling the vault from a distance. She's right, the magic down there is different, older. It's not going to just yield because I push at it. Can you break it?" Harry considered. He'd spent part of the walk to the safe house extending his senses toward Gringotts, feeling the shape of its defenses. The goblin enchantments were impressive, dense, interlocking, designed by a species that thought about magic in fundamentally different ways than wizards. Where wizarding wards were like walls, goblin enchantments were like ecosystems, each element supporting and reinforcing the others in complex feedback loops. Break it, yes, but it would be destructive, and there are innocent people in that bank, goblins, human customers. I don't want to tear through their security like a wrecking ball. "So we need another approach," Ron said. "We need a goblin," Harry said. Ron's eyebrows rose. "You want to negotiate with goblins? Have you met goblins?" "I met Griffook. Bill's told me about goblin culture. They respect power and they respect bargains made in good faith. I'm not going to break into their bank. I'm going to walk up to the front door and make a deal." "A deal for what?" Hermione asked carefully. "They're not going to let you waltz into the Lestrange vault because you asked nicely. They will if I offer them something they want more than the contents of one vault." Harry leaned back. "Goblins have wanted wand rights for centuries. The right to carry wands, to be trained in wizarding magic, to be treated as equals in the magical world. Every goblin rebellion in history has been about that fundamental inequality. The current ministry won't give it to them. Voldemort certainly won't. But the war is going to end, and when it does, whoever's sitting at the table gets to decide what the new world looks like." "You're going to promise them wand rights," Hermione breathed. "Harry, that's the political implications, are something we can worry about after Voldemort is dead. Right now I need access to that vault, and I'd rather get it through an alliance than force." Ron scratched his jaw. "Bill might be able to help. He's worked with the goblins for years. He knows the protocols, who to talk to, how to frame a negotiation. If we approach through him, that's smart." "Can you contact him? Patronus message. Give me 5 minutes." Ron stood, drawing his wand, and moved to the far side of the flat. A moment later, a silver Jack Russell Terrier burst from his wand tip and bounded through the wall, carrying Ron's words to Shell Cottage. In the silence that followed, Hermione closed her notebook and looked at Harry with an expression he'd been seeing more frequently, the one that meant she was thinking about something beyond tactics and Horcruxes. "What you did at the Ministry today," she said. "The Dementors, the prisoners. The statue, that wasn't just about the locket. No, you made a statement to the whole wizarding world." "I made a start." Harry turned his hands over, examining them. The scarlet energy was quiet now, barely visible, a faint warmth in his veins. Voldemort's power isn't just military. It's psychological. He rules through fear, and fear is a feedback loop. The more afraid people are, the less they resist, and the less they resist, the more power he accumulates. Breaking that loop is as important as destroying Horcruxes. You sound like you've been thinking about this a lot." "I have," he met her eyes. "Hermione, I spent 6 years being the chosen one, this symbol, this figurehead, this kid everyone projected their hopes onto. I hated it. It felt like a cage, but now," he paused, searching for the right words, "I have the power to actually be what they need. Not a symbol. A force. Someone who can walk into the Ministry and free people, who can stand between Death Eaters and wedding guests, who can look Voldemort in the eye and not flinch. If that's what it takes to break the fear, then that's what I'll do." Hermione studied him for a long moment. "Just don't lose yourself in it," she said quietly. "Power like yours, it could be intoxicating. You could start to think you have to do everything yourself, that nobody else matters because nobody else can do what you can do. That's why I have you and Ron, to remind me I'm still just Harry." "You were never just anything, Harry Potter." She smiled, and it was warm and fierce and a little bit sad. But I'll keep reminding you anyway, Ron returned, pocketing his wand. Message sent. Bill says he can set up a meeting with the Gringotts director, Ragnok, Goblin in charge of the whole operation. Day after tomorrow, neutral ground, formal protocols. He's going to call in every favor he's got. Good. That gives us a day to prepare. A day to prepare for Goblin negotiations. Ron groaned. I'd rather fight more Death Eaters. That can be arranged, Harry said dryly. The evening settled around them. Hermione warded the flat with conventional magic. She'd been expanding her repertoire rapidly over the past 3 days, driven by the same intellectual ferocity she brought to everything, and Harry layered chaos magic underneath her work. The two systems complementing each other like harmony and melody. Ron took first watch, sitting by the window with his wand across his knees and a chocolate frog card for company. Harry lay on the flat's narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. The day's events played behind his eyelids, the Ministry, the Dementors, Umbridge's face, the freed prisoners pouring through the corridors, the Locket's dying scream. He should feel triumphant. He did partly. But underneath, the triumph was a cold, clear awareness that Voldemort would respond to today with escalation. The Dark Lord couldn't let what happened at the Ministry stand. It undermined everything his regime was built on. What would Voldemort do? Harry closed his eyes and thought about it the way he'd learned to think about strategy over 6 years of being hunted. Not just the obvious moves, but the second and third order consequences. Voldemort would check his Horcruxes. He might already be checking them. He'd know the diary was long gone, the ring destroyed by Dumbledore. If he checked the locket and found it missing, found the Muggle-born trials disrupted, found the statue destroyed, found Harry Potter's fingerprints all over his Ministry, he'd panic. Voldemort was a planner, a strategist, but his weakness had always been ego. When his plans were threatened, he didn't adapt, he escalated. Bigger, crueler, more desperate, he'd move the remaining Horcruxes if he could. Retrieve them, protect them, surround them with new defences. The cup in Gringotts was behind Goblin security, he might leave it, trusting the bank's enchantments. The diadem at Hogwarts, Harry still couldn't pinpoint its exact location, only that it was there, somewhere in the castle's vast magical signature. Nagini he'd keep close. He always kept the snake close. Time was a factor now. Every day Harry waited was a day Voldemort could fortify. He rolled onto his side and the chaos magic hummed through him, and that was when it happened. The vision came without warning, not like Voldemort's intrusions through the scar connection, which had always been ice and pain and foreign rage. This was warm, red. A vibration in the chaos magic itself, a resonance between his power and something vast and distant, like two tuning forks an octave apart beginning to sing together. He saw her, not a memory this time, not an encoded lesson unlocking on schedule. Something else, a window, a crack between realities, thin as a hair but real. WANDA Maximoff stood on a mountaintop that didn't exist in any geography Harry recognized. The sky above her was fractured, great jagged lines of white light splitting the darkness like a shattered mirror, and through the cracks other skies were visible, other stars, other realities pressing against the membrane of her world. The wind tore at her dark hair and her red coat, and her hands blazed with chaos magic so bright it was almost white, and she was holding the sky together through sheer force of will. She was older than in his earliest memories, or maybe not older, maybe just more tired. The lines of her face were drawn with exhaustion, and something beyond exhaustion, a cosmic weariness that came from carrying too much power for too long. But her eyes burned with the same fierce, desperate love he remembered from the moment she'd sent him away. She wasn't alone. A woman floated beside her, dark-skinned, bright-eyed, crackling with a different kind of energy, golden and warm. And below them, on the broken landscape beneath the mountain, figures fought, people in strange costumes, wielding powers Harry couldn't categorize, holding a line against something vast and dark that pressed against reality like a hand pressing against a soap bubble. Harry couldn't hear her. The vision was silent, or nearly so, just the faintest whisper, like a radio signal from impossibly far away. But he could feel her emotions through the chaos magic, transmitted across the gap between worlds like light across fiber optic. Determination, fear, love, grief, and underneath it all, a bedrock certainty that what she was doing mattered, that the cost was worth paying. She was fighting to save her world, or a world. Maybe all of them, Mum, Harry thought, and the chaos magic surged with the emotion behind the word, and for one impossible moment, WANDA Maximoff looked up from her battle and saw him, across realities, across the void between universes. Through the thinnest crack in the fabric of everything, she saw him and her eyes went wide and her lips moved, and this time he could almost hear her. Harry. Then the vision shattered. Not gently. It was torn away, the crack between worlds slamming shut as the battle on the mountaintop demanded her full attention, and Harry was gasping on the bed in the Canterbury flat, drenched in sweat, scarlet energy arcing off his body in wild spirals that scorched the ceiling. Harry. Ron was at his side, wand up, face panicked. Harry, what? You were glowing, you were. The whole flat was shaking. I saw her. Harry sat up, chest heaving. His eyes were blazing red and he didn't try to dim them. I saw Wanda, my mother. She's alive, she's fighting something somewhere in another reality, and she saw me. Ron stared at him. Saw you? How? The chaos magic connects us. It's like a frequency, a channel. We're tuned to the same power. When my emotions peak, the connection opens just for a second. Harry pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, trying to hold the details before they faded. She's in trouble. Something big is happening in her world, but she's still fighting. Hermione appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, hair wild. I felt that. The energy spike, it woke me from a dead sleep. Harry, what happened? He told them. The mountaintop, the fractured sky, the battle, the moment of recognition. Hermione listened with the intensity of a woman whose understanding of reality was being rewritten in real time and who found the process absolutely riveting. Multiverse theory, she breathed. It's not just theoretical. You're describing direct observational evidence of parallel realities accessible through chaos magic. I'm describing seeing my mum, Harry said flatly. The physics can wait. Hermione had the grace to look abashed. Of course, sorry, did she seem all right? She seemed like someone fighting a war bigger than ours and winning through sheer stubbornness. Harry's mouth twitched. I think I get that from her. You get that from at least 3 parents, mate, Ron said. Lily James and the interdimensional witch. It's a miracle you're not more stubborn. Harry let the humour settle him. The vision had shaken something loose in his chest, a longing he didn't know how to process, for a mother he'd only just remembered, who was fighting her own battles in a reality he could barely glimpse. He wanted to reach back, to open the connection again, to tell her he was okay, that her sacrifice had worked, that he'd become what she'd hoped, but the crack had closed, and forcing it open might cause damage to the barrier between worlds. Wanda had hidden him in this reality for a reason. Tearing holes between universes wasn't something to do lightly. I'll find a way, he promised silently. When this is over, I'll find a way to reach you. The chaos magic pulsed warm in response, and he chose to interpret that as agreement. The next day was preparation. Bill Weasley arrived at the safe house mid-morning, fresh from Shell Cottage, with a leather satchel full of goblin protocols and a tension in his scarred face that eased slightly when he saw Harry. You look different, Bill said, studying him. Not just the power, though that's obvious even to someone without magical senses. You look settled, like you finally fit inside your own skin. Something like that. They sat around the table, Harry, Ron, Hermione and Bill, with goblin trade documents and cultural briefings spread between them. Bill's knowledge was extensive and precise, accumulated over years of working alongside goblins at Gringotts. First thing to understand, Bill said, leaning forward, is that goblins don't think about ownership the way we do. To a goblin, the maker of an object is its true owner always. When you buy a goblin-made sword, you've purchased the right to use it for your lifetime. When you die, it should go back to the maker or their clan. Wizards passing goblin-made objects down through inheritance is, from the goblin perspective, generations of ongoing theft. That's why they're angry about the Sword of Gryffindor, Harry said. The Sword of Gryffindor is the single most contentious object in goblin-wizard relations. Goblins made it. Gryffindor commissioned it. But from the goblin perspective, it was a lease, not a sale, and when Gryffindor died, it should have been returned. 1,000 years of wizards keeping it is 1,000 years of insult. If they ask for it, Hermione started. We're not negotiating the sword, Harry said. We're negotiating access to the Lestrange Vault and a framework for post-war goblin rights. The sword is a separate issue, and we don't muddy the water with it. Bill looked at him with something like surprise. That's actually very good negotiating instinct. I had a lot of practice dealing with people who wanted something from me without being honest about what it was. Harry's voice was dry. Dumbledore, Fudge, Scrimgeour, the Prophet. Manipulation is manipulation whether it comes from a wizard or a goblin. The antidote is the same. Be direct, be honest, and don't agree to anything you can't deliver. All right. Bill spread a piece of parchment on the table, a hand-drawn map of Gringotts' internal structure. Here's what I know about the Lestrange Vault. Deep level, ancient family vault, one of the oldest in the bank. Dragon-guarded, the blind one, the Ukrainian Ironbelly. Inside the vault, there's a Gemino curse on the contents. Anything you touch multiplies and buries you. And a Flagrante curse, the multiplied objects are burning hot. Standard high-security measures for vaults of that age. The thief's downfall, Hermione added. The waterfall that strips all magical disguises and enchantments. It's on the track down to the deep vaults. Right. Now, if we're going through official channels, if Ragnarok grants access, most of these defenses become irrelevant. The goblins control them and can deactivate them for authorized access. The question is what it takes to get that authorization. Harry nodded. What does Ragnarok want? Ragnarok is a pragmatist. He's been director for 30 years, and he's navigated every shift in wizarding politics without Gringotts losing independence. He doesn't trust wizards, any wizards, but he'll deal if the deal is good enough. What he wants, more than anything, is a seat at the table. Goblins have been second-class citizens in the magical world for centuries. They want recognition, rights, representation. If you can credibly promise that. I can, Harry said. Not just promise, I can demonstrate. Right there in the meeting, I can show him power that makes the question of goblin rights irrelevant to me personally. I don't need to fear goblins with wands. I don't need the old power structures, which means I can afford to be generous, and he'll see that. That's actually brilliant. Bill said slowly. Goblins respect power. If you show Ragnarok that you're strong enough to not need the traditional anti-goblin safeguards and then offer to remove them anyway as a gesture of good faith, he'll know I mean it because I'm not giving anything up. Exactly. Bill sat back, shaking his head. When did you get this strategic? About 4 days ago, apparently. Harry grinned and Bill laughed, the first genuine laugh Harry had heard from him since the wedding. The meeting with Ragnarok took place in a private room at the Leaky Cauldron Neutral Ground, as Bill had promised. Tom the barman had been paid handsomely to clear the upstairs and ask no questions, and the room had been warded to the ceiling by both goblin and wizard enchantments. Ragnarok was smaller than Harry expected and more imposing than his size suggested. He entered flanked by 2 goblin guards in ceremonial armor, his long fingers wrapped around a silver-headed cane that Harry's senses told him was significantly more than decorative. The goblin's face was sharp and ancient, his dark eyes missing nothing, and when he sat across from Harry at the table, he radiated the quiet authority of someone who controlled the flow of an entire nation's wealth. Harry Potter, Ragnarok said. His voice was like gravel in a silk bag, rough and refined simultaneously. The wizard who walked into the Ministry of Magic and walked out again with a piece of the Dark Lord's soul. You've made quite an impression. Director Ragnarok, thank you for agreeing to meet. I agreed because Bill Weasley is one of the few wizards who has earned goblin respect, and because the events at the Ministry suggest that the political landscape is shifting in ways that Gringotts must account for. Ragnarok's dark eyes bored into Harry. Also, I admit to curiosity. The energy you carry is unlike anything in our records, and goblin records are extensive. Harry extended his hand, palm up, and let a small bloom of scarlet light unfold above it, controlled, precise, unthreatening. Chaos magic, not wizarding in origin, from another reality entirely. Ragnarok leaned forward, and for the first time, genuine interest broke through his diplomatic mask. His long fingers twitched, and Harry sensed the goblin's own magic reaching out to examine the scarlet light, a careful, analytical probe that was more curious than hostile. Fascinating. Ragnarok murmured. The fundamental structure is entirely different from either wizard or goblin magical paradigms. It operates at a level beneath both. He sat back. You are something new, Harry Potter. I'm something that doesn't need to perpetuate the old order, Harry said. Which brings me to why I'm here. They negotiated for 3 hours. Harry laid it out plainly. There was a dark artifact in the Lestrange vault that was sustaining Voldemort's immortality. Chapter 5. The Battle of Hogwarts. The cup died quietly. After the spectacle of the Ministry, after the tense formality of the Gringotts' negotiation, after Ragnok had personally escorted them into the deepest vaults of the bank and deactivated the enchantments with a wave of his silver-headed cane while the Ukrainian Ironbelly snored in its chain-rattled sleep, after all of that, the actual destruction of Hufflepuff's cup was almost anticlimactic. Harry held the small golden cup in the Lestrange vault, surrounded by mountains of treasure that glinted in the wandlight, and pressed chaos magic into it the way a thumb presses into soft clay. The Horcrux inside screamed. They always screamed, a thin, reedy wail that echoed off the vault's stone walls and made Ragnok's guards grip their ceremonial spears tighter. Black smoke boiled from the cup's rim, formed the ghost of a face, Tom Riddle, young and handsome and furious, and dissolved. The cup went still. The dark magic winked out like a candle in a hurricane, 5 seconds, start to finish. Ragnok watched with the clinical interest of a banker observing an unusual transaction. The object is now inert, completely. Harry set the cup back on the pile of gold it had been sitting on. The dark magic is gone. The cup itself is just a cup, historically significant, goblin-forged, but no longer a vessel for a soul fragment. Goblin-forged, Ragnok repeated, and his dark eyes glittered. Made by goblin hands, belonging by goblin law to goblin kind. Harry met his gaze. The cup was made by goblins and commissioned by Helga Hufflepuff. Under the terms of our agreement, disputed artifacts of goblin make will be adjudicated by the Joint Commission after the war. I'm not going to settle a 1,000-year-old property dispute in a bank vault. The ghost of a smile crossed Ragnok's sharp face. You negotiate better than most wizards, Mr. Potter. I listen better than most wizards. There's a difference. They'd left Gringotts through the front doors, in broad daylight, Ragnok walking beside Harry through the marble lobby while every goblin teller and every human customer stopped what they were doing and stared. The message was clear. Harry Potter and the Goblin Nation were on speaking terms. The old alliances were shifting. That had been yesterday. Now Harry stood on a hill overlooking Hogsmeade at 3 a.m, the Scottish Highlands dark and cold around him, and felt the last Horcrux pulling at him from inside Hogwarts Castle, the diadem. Ravenclaw's lost diadem. Somewhere inside those ancient walls, another fragment of Voldemort's soul was hidden, and Harry could feel it. A faint, sickly pulse, like a diseased heartbeat, muffled by the castle's own massive magical signature but unmistakable to his enhanced senses. You're sure it's in there? Ron murmured beside him, breath fogging in the Highland air. Positive. The signal's been getting clearer as we got closer. It's somewhere on the upper floors, 7th floor maybe. Hard to pinpoint exactly with the castle's own magic interfering. The room of requirement. Hermione said from his other side. She'd been quiet during the hike from their apparition point, thinking, and now the conclusion arrived fully formed. Voldemort hid it there. He went to Hogwarts to ask Dumbledore for the defense against the dark arts teaching position. That was a known visit. It's in the records. He could have hidden the diadem during that visit, in the room where everything is hidden. It's the one place in the castle that doesn't appear on any map and can only be found if you know how to ask for it. The room where everything is hidden, Harry repeated. He'd been in that room, in his 5th year, when Dumbledore's army needed a place to train. The room of requirement had appeared. And before that, in a different configuration, it had served as a massive storage space, a cathedral-sized cavern filled with centuries of discarded and hidden objects. Yeah, that's where it is. I can feel it now, 7th floor behind the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. So we go in, find it, destroy it, and get out, Ron said. Same as the others. Not the same. Harry's voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. Hogwarts is occupied, Snape is headmaster. The Carrows are teaching. There are Death Eaters in the castle, and there are students' children under their control. This isn't the Ministry where I could walk in and walk out. If I go in there and start throwing power around, people get hurt. Then we don't throw power around, Hermione said. We go in quiet. The passage from Hogshead into the Room of Requirement, Neville told me about it in his last letter. The DA's been using it as a hiding place. We can get in without going through the front gates. Harry nodded. He'd been planning this for 2 days, turning over approaches, running scenarios. The quiet approach was right. Get in, find the diadem, destroy it, get out. Save the fireworks for Voldemort, but he had a feeling it wasn't going to be that simple. The chaos magic had been restless all day, humming with a low-frequency agitation that he'd learned to interpret as a kind of early warning system. Something was building. The magical atmosphere was charged, tense, the way the air felt before a thunderstorm. Voldemort knew his Horcruxes were being destroyed. He'd felt each one die, the Scar connection was gone, but the Dark Lord didn't need it to sense the annihilation of pieces of his own soul. 3 destroyed in the span of a week, after years of believing them safely hidden. He'd be checking the remaining ones. He might already know the locket was gone from the Ministry, the cup gone from Gringotts. The diadem at Hogwarts and Nagini at his side, those were all he had left. A cornered Voldemort was a dangerous Voldemort. "Let's move," Harry said. They descended the hill into Hogsmeade, Harry cloaking all 3 of them in a subtle distortion of light and perception. Not invisibility exactly, but a suggestion to the world that they weren't worth noticing. They passed through the village's deserted streets, past dark shop fronts and shuttered windows, past the patrolling Dementors that Harry nudged aside with a thought, the creatures flinching away from his power like dogs from a raised hand. The Hogshead was locked, but a whispered conversation through the door brought Aberforth Dumbledore's grizzled face to the peephole. The old man looked at Harry for a long moment, his blue eyes, so like his brother's and so unlike them, measuring, calculating. "You look like trouble." Aberforth said, "Always have. Can we come in?" Aberforth opened the door. The pub was dark, smelling of goats and old wood and strong whiskey. Ariana's portrait hung above the mantelpiece, the painted girl smiling her strange, sad smile. "The passage," Harry said, "into the Room of Requirement." "You know about that?" "Neville told us." Aberforth snorted. "That boy's been running an insurgency out of my back room for months. Him and a handful of students who'd rather fight than submit. Brave kids, stupid but brave." He moved to Ariana's portrait and murmured to her. The painted girl turned and walked away, growing smaller as she moved down a painted corridor until she disappeared. A moment later, the portrait swung open, revealing a rough stone passage beyond. "Thank you," Harry said. "Don't thank me, just don't get those kids killed." Aberforth's voice was rough, but his eyes were worried. "Whatever you've become, Potter, and I can feel from here that it's something extraordinary, remember that the people in that castle are flesh and blood. They break, they don't come back." "I know," Harry said. "That's why I'm here." The passage was long and dark and smelled of earth. They walked single file, Harry first. Scarlet light dimmed to a faint glow around his hands to guide them, Ron and Hermione behind with wands lit. The tunnel angled upward, and Harry could feel Hogwarts growing around them, the vast, ancient magical infrastructure of the castle pressing in. Thousands of enchantments layered over 1,000 years of habitation, and beneath it all the deep primal magic of the founders themselves. Sunk into the bedrock like tree roots, the castle recognized him. He felt it the moment they crossed the property line, a shift in the ambient magic, a warming, a welcome. Hogwarts had always felt like home, but now, with his chaos magic senses wide open, he understood why. The castle was semi-sentient, not alive in the way a person was, but aware, responsive, shaped by the accumulated will and love of everyone who'd ever lived within its walls. It was the most magical place in Britain, possibly the world, and it knew him. Not as a student, not as the boy who lived. As something deeper, a carrier of primal magic, chaos magic, the stuff that reality itself was built on. The castle responded to that the way a plant responds to sunlight. The passage ended at a door. Harry pushed it open and stepped into the Room of Requirement. It was configured as a living space, hammocks strung between pillars, a long table covered with food wrappers and copies of the Quibbler, blankets and sleeping bags scattered across the floor. And standing in the middle of it, wands drawn, faces hard and hopeful, were the remnants of Dumbledore's army. Neville Longbottom was at the front. He'd changed. Harry saw it immediately, and not just the cuts and bruises that marked him as someone who'd been fighting. Neville stood taller, his jaw set, his eyes holding a steady flame that hadn't been there last year. He'd grown into something while Harry was away, something solid, something brave. Harry. Neville's face split into a grin that transformed him from a battered resistance fighter back into the boy who'd stood up to his friends in first year because it was the right thing to do. About bloody time, Neville. Harry clasped his hand, felt the calluses from months of covert combat training, the wiry strength in the grip. You've been busy. The Carrows don't believe in study hall. We've been providing alternative education. Behind Neville, faces Harry knew Ginny, who'd apparently left the burrow without telling anyone and would be getting an earful from Molly when this was over. Luna Lovegood, serene as always, a bruise on her cheekbone, Seamus Finnegan. Looking like he'd been on the wrong end of a blasting curse recently. Dean Thomas, Lavender Brown, the Patil twins, Terry Boot, Michael Corner, a dozen others. They were looking at Harry the way the ministry employees had looked at him, with hope, with awe, with the desperate need to believe that someone could fix this. But there was something else in their faces too, something the ministry workers hadn't had. Knowledge, familiarity. They'd known him as a classmate, as a friend, as the kid who fell off his broom in third year and ate lunch in the Great Hall and struggled with potions. They knew he was human, and they were looking at him like that anyway. We heard what you did at the ministry, Seamus said. It's all anyone talks about. You walked in and dismantled the Muggle-born trials single-handed. Not single-handed. Ron and Hermione were there. We were moral support, Ron said modestly, and I opened a door once. The Dementors, Luna said, her voice carrying its characteristic dreamy distance. You sent them away. I could feel it. The whole country felt lighter afterward. The Raxperts decreased significantly. Harry smiled at her. Luna's worldview might operate on different axioms than most people's, but she was often right about things that mattered. I'm glad. What are you here for, Harry? Neville's voice was direct, cutting through the reunion to the heart of it. You're not here to visit. There's something hidden in the castle. In this room, actually, a different version of it. A dark artifact I need to find and destroy. It's the last piece of what's keeping Voldemort immortal. The name made a few people flinch, but Neville didn't. Neither did Ginny or Luna or any of the core DA members. They'd been fighting too long to be afraid of a word. What do you need from us? Neville asked. For the moment, nothing. I need to access the room where everything is hidden. Ron and Hermione and I go in, find the object, destroy it. If everything goes well, we're in and out in 20 minutes, and nobody knows we were here. Neville's expression said he knew exactly how rarely things went well. And if it doesn't go well, Harry held his gaze, then I need you to protect the students, get the younger years out through this passage to Aberforths. The DA covers the evacuation. Can you do that? We've been drilling evacuation protocols for months. We can have the lower years out in 15 minutes. Good. Harry turned to the room. I need you to change. I need the room where everything is hidden. The room of requirement shimmered. The hammocks and supplies faded like a dream, and the space shifted, walls stretching, ceiling rising, the room reconfiguring itself according to Harry's request. When it settled, they were standing at the edge of a space the size of a cathedral, filled with towering piles of discarded objects stretching in every direction. Mountains of broken furniture, old textbooks, ancient robes, chipped crystals, bent cauldrons, damaged brooms, centuries of things that students and teachers had hidden away, an archaeological record of Hogwarts history rendered in junk, and somewhere in there Ravenclaw's diadem. Harry closed his eyes and reached out with his senses. The chaos magic swept through the room like a searchlight, passing over and through the towering piles, cataloguing every magical signature. Most of the objects were mundane or carried only the faintest traces of enchantment. A few were more interesting. He felt old dark detectors, jinxed objects, a cabinet that thrummed with transportation magic. But he was looking for something specific, something that tasted of Voldemort's soul, that oily, corrupted signature he'd learned to recognize. There. Deep in the room, behind a wall of stacked chairs and a stuffed troll, high on a shelf next to a stained tiara case, a pulse of familiar darkness. Weaker than the locket, weaker than the cup, as if the diadem's Horcrux had been drained by centuries of isolation, but unmistakable. Found it. Harry said, "This way." They moved through the maze of junk, Harry leading, Ron and Hermione behind him. The DA members stayed at the entrance. Neville had positioned them there without being asked, a defensive line guarding the way out. Smart. The diadem sat on a bust of an ugly old warlock, tarnished and dusty, looking like nothing special. A circlet of tarnished silver set with a large blue stone that might have been beautiful once. To normal eyes, just another piece of forgotten treasure. To Harry's chaos magic senses, a wound in reality seeping dark energy like blood from a cut, he reached for it. His fingers closed around the cool metal, and the Horcrux inside jolted awake, and this time, something different happened. The diadem's dark magic connected to something. Not to Harry, he was shielded, the chaos magic wrapped around him like armor. But to something outside the castle, something distant and vast and immediately, terrifyingly familiar, Voldemort, the Dark Lord, had warded the diadem with an alarm. A direct connection to himself, dormant until someone touched it, and now screaming his location across whatever distance separated them. Harry felt the connection blaze to life and felt, at the other end of it, Voldemort's sudden, explosive awareness. He knows, Harry thought. He knows I'm here, he knows what I'm doing, and he's coming. He's coming, Harry said aloud, his voice flat and calm. Voldemort knows, he warded the diadem with an alert, and he knows I'm at Hogwarts. Ron went pale, Hermione's wand came up. Behind them, at the room's entrance, Neville's head snapped around. Harry didn't hesitate. He poured chaos magic into the diadem, and the Horcrux died, fast, brutal, no time for finesse. The soul fragment shrieked its death scream and dissolved, the dark magic evaporating, the tarnished silver going inert in his hand. 5 Horcruxes down. Only Nagini remained. He dropped the dead diadem and turned. Neville, evacuation, now. Neville didn't ask questions. He sprinted for the door, shouting orders, and the DA scattered like a well-trained unit. Ginny and Luna toward the lower floors to round up younger students, Seamus and Dean to the common rooms, others to predetermined positions throughout the castle. Harry walked out of the room of requirement, and the castle surged around him. He felt it the way you feel a change in wind direction, the ancient magic of Hogwarts shifting, responding, preparing. The castle knew what was coming. 1,000 years of protective enchantment stirred like a sleeping giant rolling over, and Harry felt the wards on the gates and walls and towers strengthening, tightening, the building itself readying for siege, and Harry helped. He reached down through the stone floor with his chaos magic, into the foundations, into the bedrock where the founder's original enchantments were sunk like the roots of an ancient tree. He found them, 4 distinct magical signatures woven together, the collaborative masterwork of Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin at the height of their power. The castle's immune system, dormant for centuries, waiting for a threat worthy of activation, Harry activated it. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every suit of armor in the castle clanked to attention, drawing their swords and axes, animated by magic that hadn't been invoked since the Middle Ages. The stone gargoyles and statues that lined the corridors shook off their stillness and turned their heads, alert, ready. The staircases stopped their random movement and locked into defensive configurations. The very walls of the castle seemed to thicken, the stones pressing more tightly together, the mortar hardening to something closer to steel than cement. And the wards blazed. Harry fed chaos magic into the Founder's framework, and the castle's protective enchantments went from strong to staggering. A dome of shimmering, nearly invisible energy settled over Hogwarts like a bell jar, resonating with the combined power of ancient wizardry and reality-shaping chaos magic. Harry stood in the 7th floor corridor, scarlet light pouring off him, eyes blazing red, and felt the first Death Eaters apparate to the edge of the grounds. Dozens. Then scores. Then hundreds. Voldemort wasn't taking chances, he was bringing everyone. Every Death Eater, every dark creature in his service, every weapon he had. Giants loomed at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Harry could feel their massive, dull magical signatures like boulders rolling downhill. Dementors circled above the tree line, though they kept their distance, remembering what had happened to their kin at the ministry. Acromantulas skittered through the undergrowth, and behind them all, approaching with cold, deliberate menace, the psychic pressure of Voldemort himself. "He's brought an army," Harry said. Ron appeared at his elbow, breathing hard from sprinting up staircases. "How big?" "Hundreds of combatants, giants, dementors, spiders, everything he's got." "Wonderful." Ron's voice was steady despite his pallor. "And on our side, us, the Dar." whatever teachers stand and fight. Harry paused, feeling the castle, feeling the people inside it, and Hogwarts herself. McGonagall found them as they descended to the entrance hall. The deputy headmistress now, really, as Snape had apparently vanished the moment the alarm went up, was striding through the corridors in emerald robes, her hat slightly askew, her face set in an expression of fierce, unshakable determination. "Potter." She stopped in front of him, took in the scarlet glow, the blazing eyes, the power that distorted the air around him, and adjusted her spectacles precisely 1 millimeter. "I see you've been busy since graduation. Professor, we need to evacuate the younger students." Neville's handling it, passage from the room of requirement to the Hog's Head. "Already in progress. The underage students are moving now. 5th years and above who wish to fight are gathering in the Great Hall." She paused. "Potter, the wards, I can feel what you've done to them. The castle hasn't been this fortified since the founders were alive. It should hold against anything short of Voldemort himself concentrating his full power on a single point. Even then, it'll take time. Time is all we need. I've sent messages to the Order. Kingsley is mobilizing everyone he can. They'll be here within the hour." "Good." Harry kept descending, McGonagall falling into step beside him. Students were streaming through the corridors, younger years heading upward toward the room of requirement, older students moving downward, wands out, faces scared but resolute. They saw Harry and the fear didn't leave their faces, but something else joined it. That same desperate, kindled hope he'd seen in the DA in the entrance hall. Flitwick was enchanting the front doors with enough defensive magic to stop a charging troll. Sprout was directing students carrying potted plants, not decorative ones, but the nasty kind, venomous tentaculars and snargaluff pods, biological weapons for the defenders. Slughorn was there too, surprisingly, his walrus mustache quivering but his wand steady, distributing potions from a conjured table, strengthening solutions, healing draughts, bottled shielding charms. "The greenhouse 3 mandrakes are mature," Sprout told Harry as he passed. "I've got earmuffs for our side. If they breach the walls, we give the giants a screaming welcome." "Brilliant. Make sure everyone on our side has protection." He pushed through the great oak doors and onto the front steps. The night was clear and cold, stars hard and bright above the towers, and the grounds of Hogwarts stretched before him. The sloping lawns, the lake, the forbidden forest, and there, at the edge of the wards, visible in the moonlight, the army of Lord Voldemort. Harry saw them with his normal eyes, and with his chaos magic senses simultaneously. With normal eyes, a dark mass at the tree line, punctuated by the hulking shapes of giants and the ghostly drift of Dementors. With chaos senses, a constellation of hostile magical signatures, hundreds of them, each one a unique combination of power and intent and malice. And at the center, like a black hole around which everything else orbited, Voldemort. The Dark Lord's magical signature was stronger than any individual Death Eater's, stronger in raw wizard power than anyone Harry had ever felt. But compared to the ocean of chaos magic that Harry carried, it was a candle next to a bonfire. Voldemort knew it too. Harry could feel the hesitation in him, the careful calculation. The Dark Lord hadn't attacked yet, hadn't tested the wards, was holding position at the edge of the grounds, thinking, planning, trying to find an angle that gave him an advantage against something he'd never encountered. Harry's voice rolled across the grounds, amplified by chaos magic, carrying to every ear defender and attacker alike. Tom, the name was deliberate. Not Voldemort, the feared title, the weapon of intimidation. Tom, the orphan's name, the human name. The name that stripped away the myth and left just a man. "I know you can hear me. I know you can feel what I am. This doesn't have to be a siege. Your Horcruxes are gone, all of them except the snake. The diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, and the piece you put in me without knowing it, all destroyed. You're mortal, Tom. For the first time in decades, you can die." Silence from the tree line. But Harry could feel the shockwave of his words hitting Voldemort's consciousness, the frantic internal check, the reach for soul fragments that weren't there anymore, the dawning horror. "Send your army home. Come alone. We end this between us and nobody else has to die tonight." Silence stretched. The defenders on the walls held their breath. The wind stirred the lake into small ripples that caught the starlight. Then Voldemort's voice split the night, magically amplified, cold and high, the inhuman hiss that had haunted Harry's nightmares for years. "You have performed some impressive tricks, Harry Potter, but you remain a child playing with powers you do not understand. I have conquered death itself. I have gone further than any wizard alive, and I will not be lectured by a boy." The attack began. They came from everywhere at once. Giants charging from the forest, each step shaking the ground. Death Eaters apparating to the ward boundary and unleashing volleys of curses that splashed against the shield like rain on glass. Dementors swooping in from above, testing the dome. Acromantulas pouring from the trees in a chittering flood, their many eyes glinting in the curse light. Harry met the first giant at the ward line. The creature was 40 feet tall and swinging a club made from a tree trunk, and it hit the ward dome with an impact that sent shockwaves rippling across the entire shield. The blow was physical, not magical, and the wards were designed primarily against magical assault. The giant's brute force made the barrier flex dangerously. Harry reached out and caught the giant. Scarlet energy wrapped around the massive creature like ribbons, lifting it off its feet, all 30 tons of it, and setting it down gently, firmly, 300 yards back from the walls. Not hurt, just moved. The giant roared in confusion, swinging its club at nothing, and tried to charge again. Harry moved it again, and again. Every time it approached, scarlet light picked it up and deposited it back at the tree line, like a toddler trying to breach a baby gate. The other giants got the message. They milled at the forest's edge, confused, occasionally taking swings at empty air. 2 of the smarter ones sat down. "That's the giants sorted," Ron said from the battlements above, his voice carrying a slightly hysterical edge. "What about the 100-odd Death Eaters?" The Death Eaters were testing the wards systematically now, coordinated curse volleys at specific points, probing for weakness. They were disciplined, Harry had to give them that. Someone was directing them, Yaxley or Dolohov probably, and the attack pattern was intelligent. Overlapping fields of fire, rotating teams so no one group exhausted their magical reserves, sustained pressure on the ward junctions. Against normal wards it would have worked. Given time, an hour, maybe 2, they'd have found a weak point and punched through. Against Harry's chaos-reinforced wards, they might as well have been throwing pebbles at a mountain, but Voldemort wasn't stupid. The probing attack was a feeler, a test, buying time while the real assault was prepared. Harry felt it building, a deep, resonant vibration in the magical spectrum, like a bass note dropping below the range of hearing. Voldemort was casting something big. Something that drew on every dark ritual he'd performed, every ounce of power he'd accumulated over decades of pushing magical boundaries. "Everyone brace," Harry said, and the castle heard him, every defender, every student, the suits of armor and the gargoyles and the stones themselves. "He's about to hit us with everything he has." The curse came from Voldemort himself, a beam of concentrated dark magic, sickly green threaded with black, that struck the ward dome like a battering ram forged in hell. It was a siege spell, ancient and terrible, the kind of magic that had been used to bring down fortress walls in the Goblin Wars. Voldemort poured his entire considerable power into it, and the beam hit the wards with a sound like the world tearing. The dome held, but it cracked, just a little. Just a hairline fracture in the reinforced reality that Harry had woven around Hogwarts, but enough for Voldemort to feel and press against, widening the gap with relentless precision. Harry slammed power into the breach, scarlet light flooding the crack, sealing it. But Voldemort kept pushing, and for the first time Harry felt genuine strain, not from lack of power, but from the complexity of maintaining a castle-wide shield while an enormously powerful dark wizard drove a wedge into it. "I can't hold the whole dome and counter him at the same time," Harry told Hermione, who stood beside him on the castle steps, her face lit by the clashing lights of red and green. "Not at this scale. The dome covers too much area, I'm spread too thin." "Then stop holding the dome." Harry looked at her. "Drop the dome, let them in. Fight them on the ground, inside the castle's own defences." Her eyes were blazing. "You're trying to be a wall, Harry. You're not a wall, you're a weapon. Let the castle be the wall, it has its own defences, the ones you activated. The armour, the gargoyles, the Founder's enchantments. Trust them. And you go be what you actually are." She was right. He was trying to protect everyone by being everywhere, and that was exactly the wrong approach. The castle could protect itself, the defenders could fight. His job wasn't to shield, it was to strike. Harry dropped the dome. The effect was immediate and violent. Death Eaters surged forward, hundreds of them pouring across the grounds, curse lights streaking ahead of them. The giants roared and charged. The acromantulas swarmed, and Hogwarts met them. The suits of armor poured from the castle like a steel tide, hundreds of them, swords and axes and maces swinging. They hit the Death Eater advance like a wall of metal, and the front line of dark wizards went down in a clanging, screaming chaos of enchanted steel. The gargoyles launched from the parapets, stone wings carrying them in diving attacks on the giants, clawing at eyes and faces. The castle walls themselves shifted, hidden arrow slits opening, defensive enchantments activating, streams of boiling oil and targeted hexes pouring from apertures that hadn't been used in 500 years. McGonagall was on the battlements, transfiguring debris into warriors. Desks became charging bulls. Stones became hawks. A suit of armor she hit with a spell tripled in size and waded into the giants like a medieval mech. Flitwick stood atop the astronomy tower, raining precision charms with such speed and accuracy that Death Eaters dropped in clusters, stunned, bound, disarmed. Sprout unleashed the mandrakes, and a wave of sonic anguish rolled across the grounds, dropping every combatant without ear protection, which on the defenders' side was everyone, thanks to the earmuffs, and Harry went to war. He launched himself from the castle steps, chaos magic carrying him forward in a scarlet blur, and hit the Death Eater lines like a meteor. The first cluster of dark wizards didn't even see him coming. Scarlet energy lashed out in whipcracks of light, disarming, binding, flinging bodies through the air with precisely calculated force. Enough to incapacitate, not enough to kill. Harry was not interested in killing if he could help it. A killing curse screamed past his ear. He caught the next one in his bare hand, the green light sputtering and dying against the scarlet energy that wreathed his fist. 3 Death Eaters firing from behind a conjured barricade. Harry pulled the barricade apart with a gesture and wrapped them in cocoons of red light that pinned their arms and sealed their mouths. He moved through the battlefield like a force of nature. Not flying, running, sprinting, the chaos magic accelerating him to inhuman speed, the world blurring around him as he crossed the grounds in seconds. Everywhere he went, the tide turned. Death Eaters fell or fled. Curses died in midair. Allies who were faltering suddenly found the pressure on them evaporate as Harry swept through and cleaned up the opposition. But he couldn't be everywhere. A scream from the castle, high, terrible, cutting through the din of battle. Harry spun, senses flaring, and found the source, the castle's east wall, where a pack of Death Eaters had breached through a door that the armor knights hadn't reached in time. Inside, in a corridor on the 3rd floor, spells were flying and someone was down. Harry folded space and was there. Fred Weasley lay on the stone floor, blood on his face, his eyes closed. George knelt over him, wand up, shielding his twin from the Death Eaters pressing forward down the corridor. Percy was there too, Percy, who'd been estranged, who'd chosen the ministry over his family, who was now standing over his brothers with his glasses cracked and his wand blazing, teeth bared, fighting with a ferocity Harry had never seen from the most pompous Weasley. The Death Eater at the front of the pack. Augustus Rookwood. Harry recognized the pockmarked face, raised his wand and fired a curse that blazed white-hot toward Fred's prone form. Harry caught it, absorbed it, turned it into harmless light that scattered like confetti. Rookwood's eyes went wide behind his mask. He turned to run. Harry didn't let him. Scarlet energy caught all 5 Death Eaters in the corridor, pinned them to the walls and sealed them there, stuck like insects in amber, immobilized, neutralized. Then he was on his knees beside Fred. The curse had hit Fred in the chest, a blasting hex, not a killing curse, but powerful enough to crack ribs and hemorrhage internal organs. Harry could see the damage with his chaos magic senses, ruptured blood vessels, a collapsed lung, internal bleeding spreading through the abdominal cavity. Bad, very bad, minutes from fatal. Move, Harry told George, and the surviving twin, the twin who was about to become the only twin, scrambled aside with desperate eyes. Harry pressed both hands to Fred's chest and the scarlet light poured in, not crude force precision. He could see the damage at a cellular level, could feel the ruptured tissue and the spreading blood, and the chaos magic responded to his desperate, focused will. Vessels sealed, torn muscle knitted. The collapsed lung reinflated with a wet, rattling gasp as Fred's body arched off the floor. It was the hardest healing he'd ever attempted. The human body was staggeringly complex, billions of cells, each one a universe of chemical reactions, and repairing the damage without causing more required a level of precision that made ward reinforcement look like finger painting. Harry's temples throbbed, sweat rolled down his face. The scarlet light pulsed erratically, his control wavering at the edges. Fred's eyes opened, unfocused, confused, alive. "WH happen," Fred mumbled. "You got hit," Harry said, sagging back on his heels. "You're fine, don't move." "Harry." Fred blinked at the scarlet light fading from Harry's hands. Did you glow heal me?" "Shut up and lie still." "He glow healed me," Fred told George with a loopy grin. "I've been glow healed." George made a sound between a laugh and a sob and grabbed his twin's hand. Percy stood over all of them, one still raised, tears streaming down his face, guarding his brothers with the fierce protectiveness of a man who'd almost lost everything and knew it. Harry stood. The healing had cost him, not in power but in focus. His head was pounding and the edges of his vision were slightly fuzzy, but there was a battle raging and he couldn't stop. "Get him to the infirmary," Harry told Percy. "George, go with them." He was moving again before they could respond. Back through the castle, downstairs, through corridors where the battle ebbed and flowed. The defenders were holding. McGonagall's animated army and the castle's own defences were carrying the weight, and the DA members were fighting with a disciplined ferocity that would have made Moody proud. But people were falling on both sides, the corridors slick with blood and debris, and the sheer numbers of Voldemort's forces were starting to tell. Harry burst through the front doors and back onto the grounds. The scene was apocalyptic, curse light painting the night in streaks of colour, giants wrestling with animated statues, acromantulas tangling with defenders, fires burning in the Quidditch pitch. The noise was staggering, a wall of sound, explosions, screams, the clash of steel, the roar of creatures. He found Voldemort. The Dark Lord stood at the edge of the forbidden forest behind his lines, Nagini coiled at his feet. He wasn't fighting, he was watching. Directing. His red eyes tracked the battle with cold calculation, his wand occasionally flicking to send a curse or command toward a specific point, but he was conserving himself. Waiting. Letting his army do the work, the softening up, and preserving his own strength for the moment when Harry was tired enough to face. Their eyes met across the battlefield. 400 yards of chaos between them, and the connection was immediate, not the old scar link destroyed with the Horcrux, but something more fundamental. Two wizards, two powers, the axis around which the entire war turned. Voldemort smiled. It was a terrible thing to see, the lipless mouth curving, the red eyes glittering with an intelligence that was entirely, frighteningly sane. He pointed his wand at the sky. The dark mark erupted overhead, not the usual skull and serpent, but something amplified, enormous, covering the entire sky above Hogwarts. And from it, dark shapes began to descend, not Dementors, something else. Creatures Harry had never seen, winged, skeletal, wreathed in dark fire, each one the size of a horse. A dozen of them, then 2 dozen, then 50, pouring from the dark mark like wasps from a disturbed nest. "Inferi," Hermione gasped from somewhere behind him. "Modified Inferi, he's given them flight and fire. That's not supposed to be possible." "He's been busy," Harry said grimly. The flying Inferi dove toward the castle, dark fire streaming from their skeletal forms. Where the fire touched, it burned, not just physically but magically, eating through enchantments, corroding the castle's defences like acid. The gargoyles that rose to intercept were overwhelmed, stone shattering under impacts from creatures that burned with cursed flame. Harry raised both hands and the sky turned red. The chaos magic erupted from him in a wave that climbed vertically, spreading across the sky above Hogwarts like an aurora. It met the descending Inferi and unmade them, not one by one but all at once, a blanket negation that revoked the dark magic animating them. The flying corpses came apart mid-dive, the cursed fire dying, the bones scattering into dust that drifted down like black snow. 50 enhanced Inferi, destroyed in a single gesture, the battlefield paused. Both sides momentarily stopped fighting and looked up at the scarlet sky. Harry brought his hands down and the aurora faded. He was breathing hard now. The Inferi negation and Fred's healing and the hours of ward maintenance before that were adding up. Not depleting his power, the chaos magic reservoir was still vast, still deep, but taxing his focus, his ability to wield it precisely. He was a sprinter in the 20th mile, his mind rather than his muscles beginning to burn, but it wasn't over yet. Nagini was still alive, and Voldemort was still standing. "Neville," Harry shouted, and his voice carried across the battlefield. The chaos magic found Neville Longbottom in the courtyard, fighting back-to-back with Luna, and amplified Harry's words to reach him. "The snake, Nagini, she's the last one, she has to die." Neville's head snapped up. Across the chaos of the battlefield, through smoke and spellfire and the wreckage of 1,000 years of peace, their eyes met. Harry had the sword of Gryffindor in his hand. He'd summoned it without conscious thought, chaos magic reaching into the headmaster's office, through the wards, through the glass case, plucking the ruby-hilted blade from its resting place and folding space to deliver it. It appeared in his grip with a ring of steel gleaming, the blade suffused with basilisk venom that would destroy any Horcrux it touched. He threw it. The sword spun through the air in a perfect arc, trailing a faint scarlet shimmer, crossing the 200 yards between Harry and Neville in a flat, spinning trajectory that defied wind and gravity. Neville reached up and caught it by the hilt. His fingers closed around the ruby-studded grip, as if they'd been made for it, and the blade sang, a clear, high note that cut through the battlefield noise like a bell. "Kill the snake," Harry roared, then he turned and walked toward Voldemort, the Death Eaters between them scattered. Some fought, curses flew at Harry from a dozen angles, and he walked through them the way a hot knife walks through butter. Scarlet shields deflected what he didn't bother to catch. Stunning spells, disarming charms, body binds. The chaos magic handled the incoming fire almost autonomously now, his subconscious mind managing defense while his conscious attention focused entirely on the pale figure at the forest's edge. Voldemort waited for him. The Dark Lord hadn't moved. He stood with his U-wand at his side, Nagini coiled and hissing at his feet, and watched Harry approach with those terrible red eyes. 40 yards. 30. 20. "You've been impressive tonight, Harry," Voldemort said. His voice was calm, conversational, as if they were meeting for tea rather than standing on opposite sides of a massacre. "Truly. Whatever power you found, and I will discover its source, I assure you, you have used it with more skill than I would have expected from someone your age." "Thanks, Tom, that means a lot. But power alone has never been sufficient. I learned that lesson young. Power must be paired with knowledge, with cunning, with the willingness to do what others will not." Voldemort raised his wand slowly, deliberately. "You have power. But you are still a boy playing at war, held back by your precious morality, your refusal to kill, your sentimental attachment to people who will die regardless of your protection." "You done?" Voldemort's eyes narrowed. "I have prepared for this, Harry. Whatever you are, whatever that red light is, I have not spent the last week idle. I have performed rituals, consumed artifacts, pushed the boundaries of magic in ways even the Darkhold." He stopped. The word had slipped out. Harry caught it, and the chaos magic blazed in recognition. "The Darkhold," Harry said softly. "You know about the Darkhold." For the first time, something shifted in Voldemort's expression, not fear, not yet, but the awareness of having revealed more than intended. His lips pressed into a thin line. "I have studied texts that span realities," Voldemort said, recovering smoothly. "The barriers between worlds are not as impermeable as the ignorant believe. I have touched the edges of knowledge that exists beyond this plane, and I recognized the signature of your power the moment I felt it. Chaos magic. The legacy of a dead woman from a dead world." "She's not dead," Harry said, and the chaos magic in him surged with the certainty. "And you don't know nearly as much about this as you think you do." "I know enough." Voldemort raised his wand to eye level, aiming directly at Harry's chest. "I know that chaos magic is fueled by emotion, by will, and I know that will can be broken." He struck, not with a killing curse, with something else entirely. A spell Harry had never seen, that blazed with a sickly light that was neither green nor black but something between, something that the chaos magic screamed a warning about a fraction of a second before it hit. Harry's shield caught it, barely. The spell hit the scarlet barrier and didn't dissolve or deflect. It pushed, burrowed, drilled into the chaos magic like a parasite, carrying with it a psychic payload that struck Harry's mind like a hammer: despair, hopelessness. The absolute, crushing certainty that nothing mattered, that he was alone, that everyone he loved was already dead, that power was meaningless because the universe was cold and empty and didn't care. It was Dementor magic amplified 1,000-fold, refined and weaponized by a genius who'd had a week to study the problem of fighting someone immune to conventional curses. Voldemort couldn't overpower Harry's chaos magic, so he'd gone for the thing that fueled it: emotion. Will. The psychological engine that made chaos magic work. For one terrible moment, Harry faltered. The scarlet light around him dimmed. The despair clawed at his mind, whispering in voices he recognized: Sirius falling through the veil, Dumbledore falling from the tower. His mother's scream as she died to protect him. His mother's scream. The memory came from deep inside him, from the place where Wanda's encoded legacy lived, and it wasn't the scream of a woman dying. It was the scream of a woman choosing. Lily Potter choosing to stand between her son and death. WANDA Maximoff choosing to tear a soul from between worlds and give it a new life. Two women, two realities, the same impossible love. You'll remember. You'll know what you are. Harry's eyes blazed scarlet and the despair spell shattered. The psychic payload blew apart, fragmented by a surge of chaos magic driven not by rage or desperation, but by love, deep, certain, unshakable love, the kind that had already defied death twice and would do it again as many times as necessary. The scarlet light around Harry exploded outward, brighter than it had ever been, and Voldemort stumbled back, shielding his eyes. "You want to break my will," Harry said, and his voice echoed with harmonics that vibrated in the fabric of reality. "My will was forged by two women who looked at death and said, 'Not my son.' You can't break something that was built by that kind of love, Tom. You never could. That's always been your weakness. You don't understand the thing that keeps beating you." Voldemort's composure cracked. The mask of cold intelligence fractured, and underneath it, Harry saw what was always there: the orphan boy, terrified, furious, raging against a world that had never loved him and never would. Avada Kedavra. The killing curse blazed from Voldemort's wand, full power, no restraint, the ultimate expression of the desire to destroy. Harry didn't block it, didn't dodge, didn't catch it in a shield. He raised his hand and unmade it. The green light came apart 6 inches from his palm, deconstructed at the fundamental level, the magical principles that allowed it to exist revoked with the casual authority of someone editing a document. The curse didn't just fail, it ceased to have ever been a viable concept within the local area of reality. For a radius of 10 feet around Harry Potter, the killing curse simply did not work. Voldemort stared at his wand, then at Harry. And for the first time since Harry had known him, the Dark Lord's face showed pure, naked animal terror. A scream split the air behind them. Not human, serpentine, high and piercing and agonized, both of them turned. Across the battlefield, visible in the spell light, Neville Longbottom stood over the thrashing body of Nagini, the sword of Gryffindor buried to the hilt in the great snake's skull. Venom-laced goblin silver, meeting Horcrux harbouring flesh. The snake convulsed, dark smoke pouring from the wound, and went still. The last Horcrux died. Harry turned back to Voldemort and watched it happen, watched the moment the Dark Lord felt the last thread of his immortality snap. Watched the desperation bloom in those red eyes, the frantic calculation, the search for options in a landscape that had just gone barren. And then Voldemort did something Harry hadn't expected. He ran, not physically, he couldn't outrun Harry. He tore. The Dark Lord raised his wand and slashed at the air, and the fabric of reality split open in front of him. A jagged, bleeding wound in the world, a dimensional tear that Harry's chaos magic senses recognized instantly. A portal. Crude, dangerous, unstable, but functional. Voldemort was trying to flee into the space between realities. The multiverse, Harry realized with a jolt of ice in his veins. Voldemort had studied enough to know it existed, and he was desperate enough to try reaching it. A Dark Lord loose in the multiverse, in Wanda's multiverse, was a catastrophe beyond imagination. "No," Harry said. He lunged. Scarlet energy erupted around him and he crossed the distance to Voldemort in a single step, space folding, the world compressing. He caught the Dark Lord at the threshold of the tier, one of Voldemort's feet already through, the void between realities howling around them, wind from nowhere tearing at their robes. Harry grabbed Voldemort's arm. The physical contact sent a shock through both of them. Two opposing magical forces, the darkest wizard magic and the deepest chaos magic, meeting in a cascade of sparks and lightning that scorched the ground beneath their feet. "Let me go." Voldemort shrieked, and the mask was completely gone now, the cultured menace replaced by raw, screaming terror. He clawed at Harry's grip, fired curses point-blank that the chaos magic ate without effort, twisted and writhed and fought with the desperate strength of a man who had spent his entire life avoiding the one thing he feared most: death. Simple, final, inescapable death. Harry held on. The dimensional tier writhed around them, unstable, threatening to collapse and take them both into the void. Through the tier, Harry could see it, the space between realities, vast and dark and streaming with light, other worlds visible as distant stars, the multiverse in all its terrible beauty. And there, far away but unmistakable, a thread of scarlet light, Wanda's signature. His mother's power echoing across the void, close it, the instinct said, "End this." Harry pulled Voldemort back from the threshold. The Dark Lord fought him, fought with everything he had, wand slashing, curses flying, the U-wand blazing with power. A Cruciatus hit Harry's chest at point-blank range and he felt it, the first spell that had actually reached him. The pain searing and real, and he held on, because pain was just sensation and he'd been through worse and love was stronger. He threw Voldemort backward, away from the tier, and the Dark Lord hit the ground hard. Harry raised his hand and the dimensional tier sealed, chaos magic stitching the wound in reality closed with a sound like a zipper running, the howling void silenced, the portal gone. Voldemort lay on the scorched grass, wandless. His U-wand had spun away during the struggle, and looked up at Harry with the eyes of a man seeing the end of everything he'd built. "You're afraid of death," Harry said, standing over him. "You've always been afraid of it. Everything you've done, the Horcruxes, the murders, the empire of fear, all of it, just running from the one thing every human being has to face." Voldemort's lip curled. Even now, even broken and mortal and defeated, the contempt was there. "And you're not afraid. You with your impossible power, your stolen magic, my mother's magic. Given, not stolen, and no, I'm not afraid." Harry looked at the man on the ground, Tom Marvolo Riddle, born in a London orphanage, unloved and unloving, brilliant and broken and small in every way that mattered. "My mothers both chose death to save someone they loved. Lily stood in front of a killing curse for me. Wanda reached across realities and spent herself to give me a life. That's what death means to the people I come from. It's not the end. It's the price of love. And it's a price they were willing to pay." "Sentiment," Voldemort hissed. "Yeah," Harry said. "It is." He raised his hand and the scarlet light gathered, dense, bright, final. "That's why you lose. The chaos magic struck, not a curse, not an attack, a negation." The same technique he'd used on the Horcruxes, scaled up, targeted not at a soul fragment but at the dark magic that sustained Voldemort's unnatural existence. Every ritual, every enhancement, every stolen year of life. Harry revoked them all, peeling back the layers of dark magic that Tom Riddle had wrapped around himself like armor, stripping him down to the mortal man beneath. Voldemort screamed. It was the worst sound Harry had ever heard, a shriek of existential horror, the sound of a man feeling himself become human again for the first time in 50 years. The dark magic poured off him like smoke, decades of accumulated power dissolving, and the body on the ground aged, not grotesquely, not dramatically, but enough. The snake-like features softened slightly. The red eyes flickered, and for one moment, Harry saw the ghost of the handsome boy Tom Riddle had been, the orphan who'd been brilliant and afraid and had chosen power over love at every crossroads. Then the light in those eyes went out. Not because Harry killed him, the chaos magic hadn't struck a killing blow, but because Tom Riddle, stripped of his immortality, stripped of his dark enhancements, stripped of everything he'd used to outrun the death he feared, simply stopped. His heart, without the dark magic to sustain it, gave out. His body, without the rituals to preserve it, surrendered to the years it had been cheating. Voldemort died. Not with a bang. Not with a final curse or a dramatic explosion. He died the way everyone dies, quietly, simply, the animating spark departing a body that could no longer hold it. Harry stood over the body of Tom Riddle and felt the war end. It happened in stages. The Death Eaters felt it first, the dark mark on their arms burning white-hot and then going cold, dead, the connection to their master severed permanently. Some dropped their wands immediately. Some tried to run. Some fought on out of inertia or desperation, but without Voldemort's will driving them, the coordination collapsed, and the defense of Hogwarts became a mop-up operation. The giants, freed from whatever compulsion had driven them, turned and lumbered back into the forest. The acromantulas retreated to their nest. The few remaining Dementors, the ones Harry hadn't already neutralized, drifted away into the darkness, purposeless, and across the grounds from the castle a sound rose, not a cheer, not yet, something quieter and more profound. A collective exhale. The release of breath that had been held for years, the first moment of safety in a world that had forgotten what safe felt like. Neville was the first to reach him. The sword of Gryffindor was still in his hand, Nagini's blood darkening the blade, and his face was streaked with sweat and soot and tears he hadn't noticed shedding. He looked at the body on the ground, looked at Harry. Is it done? It's done. Neville nodded once slowly, and then sat down on the grass as if his legs had simply decided they were finished for the evening. Ron and Hermione arrived together, running, and Harry caught them both. Literally, physically, his arms around them, pulling them in, holding on. Hermione was crying. Ron was shaking, Harry was doing both. You did it, Hermione whispered into his shoulder. We did it, Harry said. Around them the battlefield went quiet. The last curses faded, the last fighters lowered their wands. Dawn was coming, the first grey light of morning touching the eastern sky, painting the towers of Hogwarts in shades of gold and rose. Harry held his friends and breathed, and let the scarlet light dim to nothing, and was, for one perfect moment, just a boy standing in the sunrise at the end of a very long night. Chapter 6. The Scarlet Sun, the morning after the end of the world, was remarkably ordinary. Harry woke in the Gryffindor dormitory, in his old four-poster bed, still wearing the clothes he'd fought in. Someone had pulled a blanket over him. Hermione, probably, or maybe Molly, who'd arrived with the Order reinforcements in the small hours and had immediately begun the work of caring for everyone within arm's reach. Sunlight fell through the tower windows in long golden columns, catching the dust motes that drifted through the air. And for a disorienting moment, Harry didn't know what year it was, what had happened, whether any of it was real. Then he felt the chaos magic humming beneath his skin, warm and quiet, and remembered everything. He lay still for a while. The dormitory was empty, Ron's bed hadn't been slept in, and the others were bare, stripped for the summer that had been interrupted by war. From far below, through layers of ancient stone, Harry could hear the murmur of voices, the clatter of activity, the sound of a castle beginning the long process of putting itself back together. His body ached. Not from magical exhaustion. The chaos magic reservoir was already refilling, vast and deep, the ocean replenishing itself from currents he didn't fully understand. But his muscles were sore, his head was tender from the sustained focus of battle, and there was a bruise on his ribs where Voldemort's point-blank Cruciatus had landed. He pressed his fingers against it and let a trickle of scarlet energy soothe the damaged tissue. The pain faded to a dull warmth. He got up. Showered in the dormitory bathroom, standing under water that the castle heated for him without being asked, the ancient plumbing responding to his magical presence with an eagerness that bordered on affection. He dressed in clean clothes he found folded on his bed, and suspected creatures' involvement because they fit perfectly and smelled of lavender. The common room was deserted. The portrait hole was open. The fat lady had apparently decided that after surviving a battle, door security could take a holiday. Harry climbed through and descended the familiar staircases, past portraits that whispered and pointed, past a suit of armor with a dented breastplate standing guard at the third floor, landing like a soldier who hadn't gotten the message that the war was over. The great hall was where everyone had gathered. Harry paused at the entrance and took it in. The 4 house tables had been pushed aside, replaced by a scattered arrangement of smaller tables, benches, and conjured chairs. Hundreds of people filled the space: students, teachers, order members, parents who'd arrived during the night, Hogsmeade villagers who'd come to help. House elves moved between the groups carrying trays of food and tea. Madame Pomfrey had established a triage station along the east wall, where the wounded were being treated with a brisk efficiency that brooked no complaints. The ceiling was open to the sky, the enchantment showing a clear, bright morning, clouds like cotton against the blue. Through the tall windows, Harry could see the grounds. Scarred, scorched, littered with debris, but bathed in sunlight that made the lake glitter and the forbidden forest look almost peaceful. He saw the dead, too. A section of the hall had been set aside, quiet and separate, where the fallen lay under white sheets. Not many fewer than there might have been, fewer than there would have been without the castle's defences and Harry's intervention. But enough. Each one a person, a name, a life cut short. Harry's eyes moved across the white shapes, and he felt each one like a stone in his chest. He'd saved Fred. He'd shielded as many as he could, but he hadn't been everywhere, and war collected its debts regardless of miracles. Remus Lupin sat on a bench near the triage station, his arm in a sling, his face grey with exhaustion but alive. Beside him Tonks, her hair a defiant electric blue, their infant son cradled in the crook of her good arm. She'd taken a curse to the shoulder during the battle, but had kept fighting one-handed until the end. Lupin saw Harry and something moved across his face, relief and grief and a complicated pride. Harry crossed to them. "You're both all right." "Functional," Lupin said with the ghost of a smile. "Which after last night counts as a victory." He looked at Harry, really looked, the way he'd looked that first night at the Burrow, searching for the boy he knew inside the extraordinary thing Harry had become. "How are you?" Harry considered the question honestly. How was he? He'd destroyed a Dark Lord, ended a war, saved a castle, healed a Weasley, and burned through more magical energy in 12 hours than most wizards used in a lifetime. He was 17 years old and he'd killed someone. Not directly, not with violence, but he'd stripped away the dark magic that sustained Voldemort's life and watched him die, and that was going to sit with him for a long time. He was tired in ways that sleep alone wouldn't fix. He was relieved and grieving and uncertain, and underneath it all quietly, persistently amazed that he was alive. "Ask me next week," Harry said, echoing what he'd told Lupin that first night, and Lupin's smile widened. "Fair enough." Tonks shifted the baby and fixed Harry with a look. "You should eat and sleep, and then eat again in that order. I just woke up. Then eat." The house elves have been cooking since dawn, and Molly Weasley has been personally overseeing the production of enough shepherd's pie to feed a small army, which is convenient because that's roughly what we've got. Harry found Ron and Hermione at a table near the centre of the hall, surrounded by Weasleys. The family was all there, all alive, all whole, which was a miracle in itself, and one that Harry's intervention had made possible. Fred sat propped against George, his colour poor but improving, bandaged ribs under his shirt and a pallor that would take days to fully clear. But he was alive and talking, which was more than anyone had dared to hope 12 hours ago. And then he just caught me right, this red light everywhere, and I swear I could feel my ribs knitting back together. It was the strangest sensation, like fizzy water inside your chest. "Fizzy water," George repeated. "You nearly died and you're comparing the healing magic that saved your life to fizzy water. Perrier, the fancy kind. You've never had Perrier in your life, Fred." "I've had ideas about Perrier. I'm an aspirational person." Harry slid into the seat beside Ron. The conversations around the table paused, not awkwardly, not with the stunned reverence he'd feared, but with the natural pause of a family making room. Molly, seated at the head of the table, caught his eye, and her face did something complicated that involved her chin trembling and her eyes going bright and her hands immediately reaching for a serving spoon. "Eat," she commanded, and a plate materialized before him, piled high. Shepherd's pie, roast potatoes, green beans, 2 bread rolls, and a slab of treacle tart that hadn't been part of the original serving but appeared to have been added by maternal fiat. Harry ate. The food was extraordinary, not because of any magical enhancement, but because he was alive and hungry and sitting with people he loved in a world that had, as of approximately 4 hours ago, become significantly safer. The shepherd's pie tasted like victory. The treacle tart tasted like home. Ron leaned over. "You sleep all right, like the dead." Harry paused. Poor choice of words, but yeah. Ron's mouth twitched. "Hermione's been up since 5. She's already organised a committee. A committee for what? Everything, I think." casualty lists, structural damage assessment, prisoner processing, communications with the ministry, or what's left of it. She cornered Kingsley at 6 a.m. and had a 17-point plan for transitional government on a piece of parchment. Of course she did. Hermione appeared as if summoned by the mention of her name, sliding into the seat across from them with a stack of parchment and an expression that combined bone-deep fatigue with the manic energy of someone who'd found a problem she could solve. The ministry's in chaos, she said without preamble. Thickness is in custody. The Imperius broke when Voldemort died. Kingsley's been contacted by a dozen department heads looking for direction. The Wisengamot is calling an emergency session for tomorrow. Someone needs to establish a functioning government before the power vacuum tears everything apart. And that someone is Kingsley, Harry said. Kingsley has the respect and the experience, but he needs legitimacy. The Wisengamot needs to formally appoint him, which means we need enough members present who aren't compromised by Death Eater ties. I've been going through the membership list and… Hermione. Harry reached across the table and gently pushed the parchment down. We won the war 12 hours ago. The government can wait until you've slept. The government cannot wait. Institutional vacuums are not going to collapse in the next 8 hours. Sleep, please. She glared at him. It was a magnificent glare, honed over 6 years of dealing with Harry's tendency to dismiss things like homework and rules and self-preservation. But the dark circles under her eyes betrayed her, and after a moment the glare softened into something closer to resignation. 4 hours, she said. Then I'm getting back to work. Deal. She gathered her parchment, stood, wavered slightly on her feet, and Ron was there, steady, quiet, his hand on her elbow, guiding her toward the door without making a production of it. Hermione leaned into him, just slightly, and they walked out of the great hall together with the unconscious synchronization of people who'd been through everything together, and come out the other side still standing. Harry watched them go and felt something settle in his chest. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. Rebuilding, healing, making something better from the wreckage. He finished his breakfast and stood, and the great hall noticed. Not everyone, many were absorbed in their own reunions, their own grief, their own relief. But enough people looked up, enough eyes tracked him, that Harry felt the weight of attention settle on his shoulders like a familiar coat. He'd have to figure out what to do with that. The boy who lived was dead, metaphorically at least. The narrative that had followed him since he was 11, the prophecy child, the chosen one, the sacrificial lamb, that story was over. What replaced it was still being written, and Harry wasn't sure he wanted to be the one holding the pen, but that was a problem for another day. He walked out of the great hall, through the entrance hall where the oak doors still bore the scorch marks of last night's battle, and onto the front steps of the castle. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the smell of grass and lake water, and, faintly, the char of things that had burned in the night. The ground stretched before him, beautiful and damaged in equal measure. Craters in the lawns, a section of the outer wall collapsed, the Quidditch pitch reduced to a skeleton of scorched posts and tangled bleachers. Harry descended the steps and walked, not toward anything in particular. Just walking, feeling the earth under his feet, the sun on his face, the castle's magical presence at his back like a hand on his shoulder. The chaos magic was quiet inside him, resting, content. It had done what it was made to do, protected, fought, healed, destroyed the things that needed destroying. Now it settled like a fire banked to coals, warm and patient, ready when called but not demanding. He found himself at the edge of the lake. The water was still as glass, reflecting the sky in a perfect mirror. The giant squid was somewhere in the depths. Harry could feel its lazy, alien thoughts drifting like seaweed in a current, its tentacles trailing along the lake bed. On the far shore, the forbidden forest stood dark and vast, its own ancient magic undisturbed by the battle that had raged at its margins. Harry sat on a flat stone at the water's edge and breathed. The memories of the battle were settling into his mind the way silt settles in a disturbed river, slowly, layer by layer, finding their place. He remembered everything with painful clarity, the curses, the chaos, the moments of terror and triumph and grief. The sound of Fred's ribs cracking under a curse. The feel of Voldemort's arm in his grip, thrashing, desperate. The silence after the snake died, the look in Voldemort's eyes at the end, not rage, not hatred, just fear. the bottomless, paralyzing fear of a man who had spent his entire life running from death and had finally, inevitably, been caught. Harry didn't feel satisfaction about that. He'd expected to, maybe years of hatred, of watching Voldemort destroy everyone Harry cared about, of living under the shadow of a prophecy that said one of them had to kill the other. He'd expected the end to feel like victory, like triumph, like the closing of a door that had been open for too long. Instead, it just felt sad. Tom Riddle had been a boy once, alone in an orphanage, brilliant, frightened, already broken by a world that hadn't bothered to love him. And that boy had made choices, terrible choices, monstrous choices, each one taking him further from anything human, but the boy had been real. The fear had been real. And in the end, stripped of all his power and all his pretension, Voldemort had died as Tom Riddle, afraid and alone, exactly the way he'd always dreaded. There was a lesson in that, and it had everything to do with love and nothing to do with power. "You're thinking too hard." Harry turned. Ginny Weasley stood on the path above the lake, her red hair catching the morning light, a cut on her cheek from the battle and grass stains on her knees from where she'd dived to avoid a curse. She looked exhausted and fierce and alive, and seeing her made something in Harry's chest unclench that he hadn't realized was tight. "Old habit," he said. She came down to the water's edge and sat beside him on the stone, not touching but close. The silence between them was comfortable, the silence of two people who knew each other well enough to not need to fill every moment with words. "Fred's going to be fine," she said after a while. "Madame Pomfrey says full recovery in a week." "Mum hasn't stopped crying since she found out how close it was." She paused. "You saved him." "I was close enough to reach him, that's all." "That's not all, and you know it. The healing you did, Pomfrey said he was minutes from dying, maybe less. You repaired internal damage that would have taken a team of St. Mungo's healers working together. You did it in 30 seconds on a battlefield. The chaos magic is part of you. Stop separating yourself from what you can do, Harry. You did that. You saved my brother." Harry was quiet. She was right, and he knew it, and the discomfort he felt about accepting it was something he'd have to work through. He'd spent his whole life being told his power was a burden, a target, something to hide or be ashamed of. The chaos magic had changed the scale, but not the instinct. Ginny seemed to read all of this on his face because she shook her head and almost smiled. "You're going to need time, aren't you, to figure all this out?" "Probably." "That's fine. We've got time now." She looked out across the lake. "I meant what I said at the wedding. When you're ready, we talk." "No rush." "Ginny, no rush, Harry. I've waited this long. I can wait a bit more." She bumped her shoulder against his, brief and warm. "But don't make me wait too long. I have a limited attention span, and Oliver Wood has been sending very flattering owls about my Quidditch potential." Harry laughed, a real laugh, startled out of him, and the chaos magic pulsed warm and bright in response. "Oliver Wood? He says I have professional-level chaser instincts. He's very complimentary, very persistent. I'll keep that in mind." She grinned, stood, brushed off her jeans, and headed back toward the castle with the unhurried stride of someone who knew exactly where she stood and was content to let the world catch up. Harry watched her go and felt the complicated warmth in his chest settle into something steadier. A promise. A possibility. Something to build toward when the dust cleared and the grief softened, and he figured out who he was going to be in this new world. The rest of the morning passed in the strange, suspended unreality of aftermath. Harry moved through the castle, helping where he could, repairing walls with chaos magic, reinforcing damaged structures, clearing debris from corridors. The castle responded to his efforts with gratitude, its ancient magic intertwining with his scarlet energy in a collaboration that felt natural, almost organic. Where he touched the stones, they healed faster. Where his power flowed through the foundations, the wards strengthened and stabilized. He found Snape in the hospital wing. The former headmaster, former spy, former Death Eater, former most complicated man Harry had ever known lay in a bed near the window, his neck bandaged, his face the colour of old parchment. Nagini had gotten to him before the battle. Harry learned from Pomfrey's clipped account. Voldemort had set the snake on Snape when he suspected the man's loyalty was wavering, and Snape had very nearly died in the Shrieking Shack before Order members found him and brought him in. Harry stood beside the bed and looked at the man who'd hated him and protected him in equal measure for 6 years. Snape's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. And the curse damage from Nagini's venom was severe, dark veins spreading from the wound on his neck, the venom's magical component resisting conventional treatment. Harry placed his hand on the bandaged wound. The chaos magic reached in, found the venom, and began to disassemble it, breaking down the dark magical component molecule by molecule, neutralizing the toxin, encouraging the damaged tissue to regenerate. It was delicate work, requiring the same cellular-level precision he'd used on Fred, and Harry took his time with it. Snape's eyes opened. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The black eyes stared up at Harry, not with their usual contempt or carefully maintained coldness, but with something raw and exposed, the way a man looks when he's been stripped to the bone and hasn't yet rebuilt his defenses. "Potter," Snape rasped. His voice was a wreck, shredded by the throat wound. "Professor." Harry kept his hand steady, the healing continuing. "Don't talk, the venom did a number on your throat." "I can see the light." Snape's eyes tracked the scarlet energy flowing from Harry's hand. "What are you?" "Long story." Harry paused. "I know what you did. I know about you and my mother, Lily. I know you spent 16 years protecting me because of her." Something moved in Snape's face, a flinch, a crack in the armor. "How?" "My other abilities include enhanced perception. I could read your loyalties during the battle, surface thoughts, emotional signatures." Harry held Snape's gaze. "You loved her, and you kept your promise. Even after Dumbledore died, even when Voldemort trusted you completely, you protected me and the students. You were the bravest person in this war, and nobody knew." Snape stared at him, the silence stretched. Then, slowly, painfully, something shifted in the potion's master's expression, the hard, bitter shell cracking just slightly, and underneath it the exhausted, grieving man who'd spent half his life atoning for a choice he'd made as a teenager. "She had your eyes," Snape whispered. "Lily. You have her eyes. I know. No, I mean the color changed when you, whatever you became, red now, but underneath still green, still hers." Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He finished the healing in silence, the venom neutralized, the throat tissue regenerating, the dark veins fading from Snape's skin. When he pulled his hand away, the wound was closed, a thin scar the only evidence of what had been a lethal injury. "You'll recover," Harry said. "Full function." "Give it a few days." Snape nodded once. Then, with visible effort, he said something Harry had never heard him say and never expected to hear. "Thank you." Harry nodded back. There was more to say, years of resentment and misunderstanding and grudging respect to unpack, but not now. Not today. He left Snape to rest and walked out of the hospital wing with the strange lightness of a burden partially set down. Kingsley found Harry in the afternoon, in the headmaster's office where McGonagall had established a temporary command post. The office was crowded, Order members, senior Aurors, ministry officials who'd emerged from the imperious free wreckage of the government. Dumbledore's portrait watched from the wall with an expression of gentle, complex pride. "Harry." Kingsley's deep voice cut through the chatter and the room quieted. "The Wisengamot meets tomorrow. There are decisions to be made about the transitional government, war crimes proceedings, the fate of captured Death Eaters. Your input would be valuable." "My input," Harry repeated. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and looked at the assembled leaders of the wizarding world. They were looking back at him with varying degrees of expectation, deference, and carefully concealed nervousness. He understood why. The most powerful person in the room, possibly the most powerful person in the world, was a 17-year-old who hadn't finished school. The political implications of that were giving everyone heartburn. "I'll attend the session," Harry said, "but I'm not taking a government position. I'm not joining the Wisengamot, I'm not becoming an Auror, and I'm not accepting any title that puts me in the chain of command." The room shifted. Several people looked relieved, a few looked disappointed. McGonagall, behind the headmaster's desk, looked unsurprised. "The wizarding world needs institutions, not heroes," Harry continued. "If I step into a leadership role, every decision gets filtered through my power. People follow me because they're afraid of what I can do, not because the system works. That's not a government, it's a cult of personality." "It's exactly what Voldemort built, just with better intentions." "Then what do you intend to do?" Kingsley asked. Harry considered. He'd been thinking about this in the quiet moments between crises, in the spaces where the chaos magic hummed and Wanda's memories whispered. What did he want? What was he for, now that the war was over and the prophecy was fulfilled, and the boy who lived had become something entirely unprecedented? "I'm going to finish school," he said, dead silence. Then Ron, from somewhere in the back of the room, let out a snort that he tried and failed to disguise as a cough. "I'm going to finish my 7th year at Hogwarts," Harry said, ignoring Ron with practiced ease. "I'm going to sit my newts. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to work with Hermione and Kingsley and anyone else who wants to help on building a post-war wizarding world that's actually fair." Goblin writes, "I've already started negotiations with Ragnarok. House elf protections, werewolf integration. Muggle-born equality, not as a slogan but as law. The old system was broken before Voldemort and he just made it worse. We have a chance to fix it properly." "And the power?" Moody asked from the corner, his magical eye fixed on Harry with its usual unblinking intensity. The old aura had survived the battle with a new collection of scars, and an enhanced respect for Harry that manifested as even more suspicion than usual.